You embarrass me. He said it low into his wineglass with his friends leaning in to hear. She has no charm, no wit. She is simply there. The men laughed. William Harrington laughed with them. He did not know his wife was standing 8 feet behind him holding the dessert tray she had arranged with her own hands. Elizabeth did not cry. She set the tray down. She smiled at their guests. And by sunrise, she was gone. If you want to see what a quiet woman is capable of when she finally stops waiting, stay with me to the very end. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss a single part. And tell me in the comments what city you're watching from tonight so I can see just how far this story has traveled. Virginia, the autumn of 1818. The Harrington estate had not hosted a supper of that size in 11 years, and every soul in the county knew it. Elizabeth Whitmore Harrington had been awake since 4 in the morning. She had counted the silver herself, twice. She had walked the length of the long table 3 times before the sun came up straightening chairs that were already straight, because she had learned a long time ago that if something went wrong in that house, it would be her name attached to it. Hattie Boone, who had run the Harrington kitchen since before William Harrington was tall enough to reach the stove, found her there in the dark. "Ma'am?" "Good morning, Hattie." "It ain't morning yet." "Then good very early morning." "You been down here since when?" "A little while." Hattie set down her lamp. "You slept?" "I rested." "That ain't what I asked you." Elizabeth smiled without looking up. "No, I did not sleep." 32 people coming to eat," Hattie said, "and the only one worrying is the one who won't be enjoying it." "That's not true. I enjoy it." "You enjoy the part where it's over." Elizabeth laughed softly. "That is a kind of enjoying." Hattie came and stood beside her and looked down the length of that table, with her hands on her hips. "Mr. Harrington know how much you done for tonight." "He knows there's a supper." "That ain't what I asked you either, ma'am." Elizabeth adjusted a fork that did not need adjusting. "Hattie." "Yes'm?" "Please put the yellow roses on the end of the table, not the middle." Mrs. Ashford's eyes water around yellow flowers, and she is too proud to say so. Hattie stared at her for a long moment. "You remember that?" "She mentioned it once, 4 years ago." "4 years ago?" "It was a Tuesday." Hattie shook her head slowly and picked up her lamp. "Lord have mercy on this house," she said. "Don't nobody here deserve you." By 7 that evening, the Harrington house was full of light and noise and money. Judge Ashford and his wife, the Carters, the Pembertons from Richmond who had come the whole distance with 2 carriages and a girl to carry the hat boxes. Dr. Reeves, who arrived late and apologized twice. 19 more besides. And William Harrington moved through them all like a man who had been born knowing exactly how much he was worth. He was 34 years old. He was handsome in the way that made older women forgive him things. He had inherited 1,100 acres, 2 mills a name, and a very deep certainty that the world had been arranged for his comfort. He found his wife near the doorway checking on the wine. "Elizabeth." "Yes?" "The Pembertons brought their daughter." "I know. I set a place for her." "You set a place for her." He blinked. "How did you know?" "Mrs. Pemberton wrote 3 weeks ago. She said Caroline had recovered enough to travel." "She wrote to you?" "She wrote to the house. I answered." "You answer my letters." "I answer the ones you leave on the hall table for 11 days. Elizabeth said. She said it gently, without a single drop of poison in it. William was quiet for a second. Then he laughed and touched her arm. "You're a wonder with the small things." "Thank you." "Don't look like that. It's a compliment." "I know it is. You always do that. You take a compliment like a person takes bad news." Elizabeth looked up at him. "How should I take it?" But Judge Ashford had already called his name from across the room, and William was gone before the question landed. Supper began at 7:30. For the first hour, it was everything Elizabeth had planned. The venison was right. The bread was right. Mrs. Ashford did not once reach for a handkerchief. Elizabeth sat at the far end of the table where a hostess sits, and she listened. That was the thing about Elizabeth Whitmore Harrington that no one in that county had ever bothered to understand. She listened. She had listened for 7 years. She knew that Judge Ashford's youngest boy had been sent home from school, and the family had told everyone he was ill. She knew that Mr. Carter had borrowed against his tobacco twice. She knew that Dr. Reeves had not been paid by 4 families that season, and that he had never once asked them for the money, and that she had quietly sent him payment in their names so he would not go hungry. She knew all of it. She had never used a word of it against a single living soul. Mrs. Harrington? Caroline Pemberton, 19 years old, leaned toward her. Yes, dear. The table is beautiful. Thank you. Did you do it? Elizabeth hesitated for half a heartbeat. The house did it. That's not an answer, ma'am. No, Elizabeth admitted. I suppose it isn't. Down at the other end, the men had gotten loud. That was the way of it. The wine went around, the voices climbed, and after a while the wives stopped pretending to be part of the conversation. Judge Ashford was telling a story about a horse. Mr. Pemberton was arguing about the price of flour, and William Harrington sat at the head of his father's table with his father's glass in his hand, and he was happy. Harrington, Mr. Pemberton said, how long you been married now? 7 years. 7 years. The judge slapped the table. And no gray hair on you yet. He's got a peaceful wife, Mr. Carter said. That's the secret. Marry a peaceful woman. Is that what she is? Pemberton asked. Peaceful? William smiled and turned his glass in his fingers. Elizabeth. Your wife's awful quiet, Pemberton said. Been sitting down there all night. Does she ever surprise you? And here is the thing. William Harrington had a moment. One moment. He could have said she surprises me every single day. He could have said she remembered a flower that made a woman's eyes water 4 years ago. He could have said nothing at all. Instead, he wanted this table. He wanted the laugh. Surprise me, William said. He let the pause sit there the way a man does when he knows he's about to be funny. Gentlemen, my wife is kind enough. A ripple of chuckles. She is a very adequate woman. Louder now. But honestly, he lowered his voice the way men do when they intend to be heard. Sometimes she embarrasses me. The laugh came. It came from 6 men at once, big and easy, the sound of people who had never once in their lives been the person being laughed at. Embarrasses you. Now that's a hard word, Harrington. It's an honest one, William said. You've all seen her. No charm. No conversation. The other ladies have wit. Elizabeth has silence. Some men pay good money for silence, Carter said. Some men don't know what to do with it, Pemberton said, and laughed at his own joke. She's too simple, William went on. Too quiet. Put her in a room with the Richmond wives and she'd disappear inside a minute. I sometimes think I could set a chair in her place and no one would notice the difference. That was the one that broke them open. Judge Ashford laughed so hard he had to set his glass down. And in the silence right behind that laughter, a woman's voice said, William. Every head at that table turned. Elizabeth Harrington was standing 8 feet behind her husband's chair. She was holding a silver tray of preserved pears that she had put up herself in August in a hot kitchen in the dark hours before dawn, because they were the only sweet William had ever said he liked. Her hands were steady. That was what people remembered afterward. Every single person in that room remembered that her hands did not shake. Elizabeth, William said. He stood up too fast. His chair scraped. I didn't know you were... No, she said. You didn't. Mrs. Ashford put her hand over her mouth. Dr. Reeves closed his eyes. Caroline Pemberton, 19 years old, looked at her own father with an expression she would carry for the rest of her life. Elizabeth walked forward. She set the tray down in the exact center of the table. She straightened it. The pears are from the orchard behind the mill, she said to the room in a perfectly even voice. They keep best in the cold cellar. Please take some home if you like them. Nobody moved. Elizabeth, William said again. It was a joke. I know. The men were only talking. I know that too. You weren't meant to hear it. And that was when Elizabeth Harrington looked at her husband and said the only sharp thing she said all night. That is the part that ought to trouble you. Mr. Carter suddenly became very interested in his napkin. Sit down, William said. Sit down and have some wine, and let's not— I don't believe I will. Elizabeth. She turned to the table. She actually curtsied. That was the detail that got repeated in every parlor in the county for a month afterward. She curtsied to her guests. Judge Ashford, Mrs. Ashford, thank you for the long ride. Mr. and Mrs. Pemberton, I've had the east rooms made up, and there is a warming pan in Caroline's bed because she takes cold easily and her mother worries about it. Mrs. Pemberton made a small wounded sound. Dr. Reeves. Ma'am, the doctor said hoarsely. There's a basket by the door. The Mullen family will need it more than we do. Yes, ma'am. Then she turned back to William. He was still standing, still holding his glass, and for the first time in 7 years, he had absolutely no idea what was about to happen in his own house. Elizabeth, he said quietly, don't do this in front of people. I'm not doing anything, William. Then what do you call this? Elizabeth thought about it. Listening, she said. I call this listening. I've been very good at it. For God's sake. Thank you for finally telling me what you truly think. She said it without anger. That was the terrible part. Anger he could have argued with. Anger he could have called hysteria and dismissed by morning. She said it the way a person says thank you when a doctor finally tells them the truth about the fever. Then she walked out of the dining room. She did not slam a door. She did not weep in the hall. She went upstairs, and the house went on burning its expensive candles without her. William found her at 11 o'clock. He had drunk 2 more glasses by then, which meant he had arrived at the stage where a man believes he is being reasonable. Are you satisfied? Elizabeth was sitting by the window, with her hands in her lap. With what? Half that table thinks I'm a monster. Ashford wouldn't look at me. Pemberton left before the coffee. I'm sorry your evening was spoiled. Don't. He pointed at her. Don't do that voice. Which voice? That one. The gentle one. The one that makes me feel like I'm the child in the room. Elizabeth looked at her hands. William, did you mean it? Elizabeth. It's a simple question. Did you mean it? It was a joke among men. That isn't what I asked. He walked to the window. He walked back. He was a man circling a thing he did not want to pick up. You are quiet, he said finally. That's not an insult. It's a fact. You're quiet. You don't sparkle at a table. Caroline Pemberton is 19 years old, and she had that whole end of the room laughing tonight, and my wife sat there like a— He stopped. Like a what? Elizabeth asked. Don't. Say it. You said it downstairs with a glass in your hand in front of 30 people. Say it up here to me. Like a servant, William said. The word came out of him fast and ugly, and he heard it land. There it is, Elizabeth said softly. That's not what I— Yes, it is. You know what I mean. I do. She nodded slowly. I understand you perfectly. I understand you better than anyone alive, William. That's the whole trouble. He stood there breathing. I provide for you, he said. Yes. You have this house. You have a name people respect. Yes. Half the women in this county would trade places with you tomorrow. I know they would. Then what, he said, in God's name do you want? Elizabeth was quiet for a long moment. I wanted you to ask me a question, she said. What? One question. In 7 years. About anything at all that wasn't the house, or the money, or the supper. That's absurd. Ask me one now. Elizabeth. Ask me anything, William. Ask me what I'm afraid of. Ask me what I do on Thursdays. Ask me the name of my mother's sister. Ask me why I stopped playing the pianoforte in the spring of 1815. He opened his mouth. Nothing came. He stood in his own bedroom, in his own house, and he could not think of a single question to ask his wife. "You see," Elizabeth said, not cruelly, almost with pity, "you didn't think there was anything in there worth asking about." "That is not fair." "No," she agreed. "It isn't." William went to the door. He stopped with his hand on it, and for one moment, one thin moment, something almost human moved across his face. "I'll speak to Ashford tomorrow," he said. "I'll put it right." "With Ashford?" "Yes." "Not with me." "You'll have forgotten it by Sunday," William said, and he closed the door. Elizabeth sat by that window until the last carriage had gone, and the last candle had been snuffed, and the great Harrington house had settled into its own bones for the night. Then she stood up. She was still fully dressed at 2:30 in the morning, when Hattie Boone came up the back stairs with a lamp and found her folding a wool shawl into a canvas bag. Hattie stopped in the doorway. "Ma'am?" "Hattie." "What are you doing?" "I'm packing a bag." "I can see that. I asked what you're doing." Elizabeth kept folding. "Do you remember," she said, "when I came here 7 years ago? I was 24. You were the first person in this house who spoke to me like I was a person and not a piece of the arrangement." "Ma'am, don't. You brought me tea and you said, 'It'll get easier or you'll get harder,' and I'm praying for the first one." Hattie's chin trembled. "I remember." "It never got easier," Elizabeth said. "Then let it be the other one," Hattie said fiercely. "Let it be the other one. Ma'am, you got the whole county." "I've gotten harder too, Hattie. That's what nobody knows. I got very, very hard. I just did it quietly." She closed the bag. "That's the only trick I ever learned in this house. How to break in a way that doesn't make noise." Hattie set the lamp down and crossed the room and did something no housekeeper in Virginia was supposed to do to the mistress of the house. She took Elizabeth's hands. "Where are you gonna go?" "I don't know yet." "You got money." "I have my own money. My father left it to me, and William never troubled himself to look for it." "Ma'am, it's dark. It's cold. You wait till—" "If I wait until morning," Elizabeth said, "he'll come downstairs and he'll be charming, and he'll say something kind about the pears, and I will forgive him." She looked at Hattie. "I've forgiven him 100 times. It never once cost him anything. It only ever cost me." Hattie Boone wiped her face with the back of her wrist. "What do I tell him?" "Tell him the truth. Tell him I walked out the kitchen door at 3 in the morning and you couldn't stop me. He'll say I should have woke him. Then tell him you tried." "That'd be a lie, ma'am." "Yes," Elizabeth said. "It would be a small one. He's had 7 years of mine." She wrote one line before she left. She wrote it at the little desk in the morning room on a single sheet, and she left it where he could not fail to see it. "I hope you find the wife you always wanted." No accusation, no demand, no mention of the dining room or the laughter or the word he used. She did not sign it, Elizabeth Whitmore Harrington. She signed it, Elizabeth Whitmore. She took one bag, one shawl, $41, her mother's ring, and a small leather ledger that no one in that house had ever asked her about. She did not take the carriage. She did not take a horse. She walked to the crossroads in the dark and waited for the mail coach that came through at 4:30. And when the driver squinted down at her out of the fog, he said, "Ma'am, you all right?" "I'm fine." "You're Harrington's wife." "I was." The driver looked at her for a good long second. "You got fare." "I do." "Where to?" Elizabeth thought about it. "How far does this coach go?" "Far as you want to pay for ma'am." "Then let's start with far," Elizabeth said, and she climbed up. William Harrington woke at 9. He woke the way a man wakes when he has decided overnight that the whole business was overblown. He came down the stairs with a good appetite and an easy conscience. "Hattie." "Sir." "Coffee. And tell Mrs. Harrington I'd like her at breakfast." Hattie stood very still by the sideboard. "Sir." "Is she still asleep?" "No, sir." "Then where is she?" "She's gone, sir." William poured his coffee. "Gone where?" "Town." "No, sir." "Reeves, is somebody sick?" "No, sir." William put the pot down. Hattie. She left at 3 this morning, out the kitchen door, took the mail coach at the crossroads. There was a silence in that dining room that would have been perfectly audible from the yard. She what? She's gone, Mr. Harrington. Gone. He laughed. It came out wrong. Gone where? She didn't say, sir. That's absurd. Where would she go? Her father's dead. She hasn't got a brother. She hasn't got... He stopped. He was about to say anybody. Sir, there's a note on the morning room desk. He read it standing up. He read it 3 times. I hope you find the wife you always wanted. Then he folded it and put it in his coat pocket and said the thing that would follow him for the rest of his natural life. Well, William Harrington said, she'll be back by supper. Sir, she's making a point, Hattie. Women make points. She'll get 20 miles down that road, and remember, she's never spent a night alone in her life, and she'll turn straight around. Yes, sir. You don't believe me. Hattie Boone looked at the floor. Speak, woman. She counted the silver twice for you, Hattie said. 2 days running. She was down here at 4 in the morning setting that table with her own hands so's your friends would think well of you. William's jaw tightened. And she put up those pears in August in a kitchen hot as a forge because she heard you say one time in 1813 that you liked 'em. That's enough. You asked me to speak, sir. And now I'm asking you to stop. Hattie curtsied. Yes, sir. She won't be back by supper, sir. She was not back by supper. She was not back the next day, or the day after that. And this is where the story of William Harrington truly begins, because a house does not fall down all at once. A house falls down one small thing at a time, and nobody notices until they're standing in the rubble. It started on Tuesday when a man knocked at the kitchen door at 7 in the morning. Sir. William came out with his coffee. Who are you? Samuel, sir. Samuel Ward. I keep the North Fields. For how long? The man blinked. 9 years, sir. Ah. Sir, it's the Mullen boy. Who? Thomas Mullen. He's took the fever again. Mrs. Harrington usually. Mrs. Harrington is away. Yes, sir. When's she back? Soon. It's just that she generally sends down to Dr. Reeves and settles it with him direct on account of the Mullens ain't got. She does what? Samuel Ward stopped. Sir. She settles it with Reeves. With whose money? I couldn't rightly say, sir. I only know when somebody's bad off she knows about it before their own kin does. William stood in the doorway with a cup in his hand. How does she know? Beg pardon, sir. How does my wife know when a tenant's child has a fever? Samuel Ward looked at him with an expression that William would spend the next month trying to forget. It was not disrespect. It was worse than disrespect. It was the look a man gives a stranger who has just admitted he doesn't know the name of his own street. She asks, sir, Samuel said. She walks down of a Thursday and she asks. Thursdays. Ask me what I do on Thursdays. William did not sleep well that night. On Wednesday, the miller's wife came to the door and asked for Mrs. Harrington, and when told she was away, stood there so long that Hattie had to ask her twice if she needed anything. No, the woman said. No, it's only, my girl's got no shoes for the winter, and Mrs. Harrington said she'd what? William asked from the hall. The woman looked up, saw the master of the estate, and went white. Nothing, sir. It don't matter, sir. I asked you a question. She said she'd see to it, sir. She always sees to it. I'll come back another time. And the woman was gone down the drive before William could get another word out. On Thursday, 3 separate people came to the house. On Friday, 5. On Saturday, Dr. Reeves rode up the lane at noon and did not get down off his horse. Harrington. Reeves. Is she coming back? That's a strange greeting. It's the only question I've got, and I've got 2 more calls to make. William put his hands behind his back. She's visiting. Visiting who? That's a private matter. Dr. Reeves looked at him from the saddle for a long, slow moment. Harrington, I've been the physician in this county 19 years. You want to know what I think? Not particularly. I'll tell you anyway because I'm 61 and I've got no patience left. Reeves leaned forward. In the last 4 years, 17 families in this district got medicine they had no money for. 17. You know how many of them know who paid? William said nothing. None, Reeves said. Not one. Because she made me swear. Made me swear on my mother that I'd never say her name. Said folks got enough to carry without carrying gratitude too. That's my money. That's what you have to say. Reeves straightened up in the saddle. Son, that is exactly what you have to say. Don't call me son. Then don't act like a boy who's lost a toy. Reeves gathered his reins. I was at that table, Harrington. I heard what you said. It was a joke. You keep saying that word like it's a door you can walk back through. Reeves. You called that woman an embarrassment, the doctor said. In front of 30 people. In a house she keeps standing. At a table she set herself. He turned his horse. I've buried a lot of men in this county, Dr. Reeves said. Ain't a one of 'em was ever missed the way that woman's already being missed, and she's been gone 6 days. He rode off. William stood in his own drive for a long time after the sound of the hooves was gone. That night he could not find the household accounts. He looked in his study. He looked in the library. He asked Hattie, and she said flatly, Ma'am kept them. Kept them where? In the morning room, sir. Little desk, bottom drawer. He found the drawer. He found 4 leather books worn soft at the corners in a small clear hand. He opened the first one expecting numbers. He found numbers, and underneath the numbers in the margins in that same small clear hand, he found this Mrs. Carter needs medicine. Do not let her know it came from here. She has pride, and it is all she has left. The Miller children need books. 3 readers and a primer. Send them with the flour so it looks like an accident. The workers deserve warmth this winter. 12 loads of wood. Tell Samuel it is surplus. Thomas Mullen, age 6, fever again. 3rd time this year. Reeves says the house is damp. Ask about the roof without asking about the roof. William Harrington sat down on the floor of the morning room with his wife's ledger open on his knees. He turned the page. W did not come home for supper. Told Hattie to keep it warm anyway. He does not like a cold plate, and it is a small thing to give. Turn. W's birthday. He did not mention it. I made the pears. He said they were good. It was a good day. Turn. Mrs. Ashford's eyes water near yellow roses. Remember for next time. Turn. 7 years today. Nobody said anything. That is all right. I said it to myself in the orchard. And then near the back of the 4th book in handwriting that was just slightly less steady than the rest. I have begun to think that I am not unhappy. I think I have simply stopped expecting to be seen. Those are not the same thing, and I must be careful not to confuse them. William read it twice. Then he closed the book and pressed the heel of his hand against his mouth and made a sound in that empty room that no one in the state of Virginia had ever heard him make. Hattie Boone heard it from the hall. She did not go in. She stood outside the door of the morning room with a lamp in her hand and listened to William Harrington finally understand something, and then she went back down to her kitchen and let him understand it alone. On the 8th day, he rode into town. He went to the coaching inn because that was the only thread he had, and he found the driver who ran the 4:30 out of the crossroads. You carried a woman on the 15th. I carry a lot of folks, mister. This one got on in the dark at the crossroads, alone, 1 bag. The driver's face changed just slightly. I might recall it. She's my wife. That's so. I'm asking where you set her down. The driver spat into the dirt and took his time about it. Mister, I been driving that road 11 years. In 11 years, I ain't never had a woman get on my coach at 3 in the morning in the fog with 1 bag and no name. I'm aware of that. You ain't aware of much, or you wouldn't be standing here. William took a breath. I'm asking you plainly, where did she get off? She paid her fare, the driver said. She sat up front so as not to trouble nobody. She didn't cry not 1 time, and I watched for it 'cause a man in my line learns to watch for it. He shook his head slowly. And when she got down, she thanked me. like I'd done her a kindness instead of carrying her away from her own home in the middle of the night. Where? The driver looked at him, and what William Harrington saw in that man's face was not pity, and it was not anger. It was a judgment. The plain, unhurried judgment of a working man who has decided exactly what kind of person is standing in front of him. She asked me not to say. I'll pay you. I reckon you would, the driver said. That's how I know I ain't gonna tell you. He put his hat on. Good day, Mr. Harrington, and he walked away across the yard and left William Harrington standing alone in the middle of a town where every single person already knew what he had said about his wife and exactly how loud he had said it. He stood there in that yard a good while after the driver was gone, and the worst part was that nobody came over to ask him what was wrong. A month before half, that town would have crossed the street to shake his hand. Now the blacksmith kept his back turned. The woman outside the dry goods store gathered up her boy and went inside. Two men at the rail looked at him, looked at each other, and found something to talk about that did not require looking at him again. William Harrington got on his horse and rode home through a county that had known him his whole life and had in the space of 8 days quietly decided it did not much care for him. Hattie was in the kitchen when he came through the door. Sir, don't. I ain't said nothing. You were going to. No, sir. She kept working the dough. I was going to ask if you wanted supper. No. You ain't ate since yesterday morning. I said no. Yes, sir. He got halfway to the hall and stopped. Hattie? Sir? Do you know where she is? Hattie's hands did not stop moving. No, sir. Look at me when you say it. She looked at him, straight-on floured hands and all. No, sir. I do not know where she is. And it was the truth. It was also, William would learn later, not the whole of it, because there is a difference between knowing where a woman is and knowing how to reach her, and Hattie Boone had been careful to only be guilty of one of those things. If a letter comes, he said. Sir, if a letter comes to this house in her hand, you bring it to me before you do anything else. Yes, sir. Before you do anything else, Hattie. I heard you the first time, Mr. Harrington. He went up the stairs, and Hattie Boone stood in that kitchen with her hands in the dough and her jaw set, and she said very quietly to nobody at all, Then you best hope she writes to you, and not to me. The estate started coming apart on the 10th day. It did not come apart the way a man expects. There was no fire, no flood, no bank calling in a note. It came apart in 100 small places at once, like a coat that has been mended so many times you cannot tell anymore which thread is holding it together. It started when Samuel Ward came up to the house at 6 in the morning and stood at the kitchen door with his hat in his hands. Sir? Ward? The men are asking about the wood. What wood? The winter wood, sir. William rubbed his eyes. It's October. Yes, sir. That's why they're asking. Ask me in December. Samuel did not move. Beg pardon, sir, but Mrs. Harrington always had it hauled the first week of October. 12 loads. Down to the row houses. 12 loads. Yes, sir. To the workers. Yes, sir. William set down his cup. Ward, I pay wages. A man buys his own wood with his wages. Samuel Ward looked at him a long moment. Yes, sir, he said. He surely does. And that was all he said. He put his hat back on and walked off down the lane, and it was not until that afternoon that William understood he had just been told something without being told anything, because at noon 4 men did not come back from dinner. By Thursday, it was 9. By the following Monday, William Harrington stood at the top of the north field and counted 11 men where there had been 26, and he rode down and got off his horse in front of Samuel Ward and said, Where are they? Hired on with Pemberton, sir. Most of 'em. Pemberton pays less than I do. Yes, sir, he does. Then why? Samuel leaned on the fence post and took his time. Sir, you want the polite answer or the true one? The true one. You sure, Ward? All right. Samuel straightened up. Ain't a man on this place got a wage that stretches to a doctor. Not one. Every one of us knowed that if our young'un took bad in the night, we could go up to that house and knock on that kitchen door, and Mrs. Harrington would come down in her shawl, and she wouldn't ask us one question about money. I ain't finished, sir. Samuel's voice did not rise, but it got harder. That weren't charity. Don't nobody here take charity. That was a woman knowing the name of every child on 1,100 acres. My Ruth had the croup 2 winters back, 2 in the morning. Mrs. Harrington sat up with her till daylight, and then she went and set your breakfast table and didn't say a word about it. William's mouth had gone dry. She never told me that. No, sir, she wouldn't have. Why not? Because you'd have had to be a man she could tell it to, Samuel said. He picked up his tools. The men ain't left over wages, Mr. Harrington. The men left 'cause the only reason they stayed got on a coach at 3 in the morning. The Mullen boy took bad on the 14th day. William heard about it from Hattie, who heard it from the girl who carried milk, and for the first time in his life, William Harrington did a thing purely because he could not stand to sit still. He rode down to the row houses himself. He had never been inside one. That was the honest truth. 1,100 acres, 2 mills, 30 families, and William Harrington had never once put his boot across the threshold of a house he owned. He knocked. The woman who opened it had been crying and did not bother to hide it. Mr. Harrington? Mrs. Mullen? Sir, if it's about the rent, my husband. It isn't about the rent. She stood in the doorway holding it half closed, the way a person does when they expect to be told something bad. I heard about your boy, he said. Yes, sir. I've come to help. Mrs. Mullen blinked at him. Sir? I said I've come to help. What does the doctor want? Dr. Reeves ain't been, sir. Why not? She looked at the ground. We ain't sent for him. For God's sake, woman, why not? And Mrs. Mullen looked up with a flash of something that surprised them both. Because we can't pay him, Mr. Harrington. That's why not. And Mrs. Harrington's gone, and I ain't got nobody to ask now. William reached into his coat and took out his purse. He held it out. She did not take it. Take it. No, sir. Mrs. Mullen, your child has a fever. I know what my child has, sir. Then take the money. No, sir. Her chin was shaking, but her hand stayed down. Not from you. It's the same money. It ain't the same at all, she said. And she said the thing that William Harrington would carry to his grave. When she gave it, sir, it come like a neighbor. When you give it, it come like a man paying to feel better. She shut the door. He stood on that step for a full minute with his purse in his hand like a fool, and then he got on his horse and rode 4 miles into town and knocked on Dr. Reeves's door and said, The Mullen boy, go now. I'll pay whatever it costs. Reeves put on his coat and got his bag. You could have just sent word. I didn't want to send word. No, Reeves said. I don't reckon you did. They rode out together, and neither of them said anything for 2 miles, and then Reeves said, You want to know how she did it? How she did what? How she got folks to take it? You couldn't do it just now. I could see it on you when you rode up. Tell me. She never once handed anybody money, Reeves said. Not once in 4 years. She'd send a basket and say the kitchen made too much. She'd send books with the flour and say the flour man threw 'em in. She'd pay me direct and swear me to silence so a woman could walk into my office and be treated like a paying customer with her chin up. He looked over. That woman spent 4 years making sure nobody in this county ever had to feel small in front of her. And you stood up at a supper table and told 30 people she had no charm. William did not answer. She had the only kind that matters, Reeves said. The letter from Judge Ashford came on the 17th day. It was short. It was polite. It regretted that circumstances made it impossible for the Ashfords to receive the Harringtons at Christmas, as had been their long custom. The Harringtons, plural. As if the judge had not been sitting 8 feet away when it happened. William read it twice, and then rode over there without waiting to be invited, and Ashford met him on the porch, and did not ask him inside. Harrington. You're withdrawing an invitation my family's had for 40 years. I am. Over a joke. Don't, Ashford said. Don't what? Don't. Don't stand on my porch and say that word to me again. The judge's face was perfectly still. I laughed, William. That's what's eating me. I laughed, and I have thought about it every night since. Then you're as guilty as I am. I know it, Ashford said. That's exactly why I can't have you at my table. Every time I look at you, I've got to look at me. He turned to go inside. She left me a note, William said suddenly. The judge stopped. What did it say? It said she hoped I'd find the wife I always wanted. Ashford stood there with his hand on the doorframe. You know what my Sarah said when we got in the carriage that night? No. She said, that woman has been gone from that house for years. Tonight was just the first time anybody noticed. He went inside and shut the door. Sutton's Ford was 62 miles north, and it was not much of a place. 2 streets. A church that doubled as a schoolhouse when the weather allowed. A boarding house run by a woman named Pearl Dunbar, who had buried 2 husbands and had opinions about both of them. Elizabeth Whitmore came up those steps on the second afternoon with 1 bag and asked for a room, and Pearl Dunbar looked her up and down and said, You running from a man or a debt? Neither. Everybody's running from one or the other. Then I'm running from a supper party, Elizabeth said. Pearl laughed so hard she had to sit down. $2 a week. Breakfast at 6, supper at 7, and I don't hold with foolishness. I have never once been accused of foolishness. No, Pearl said, studying her. I don't reckon you have. That might be your whole trouble. She kept to herself the first week. That was the plan. That was in fact the only plan she had, because Elizabeth Whitmore had walked out of a house at 3 in the morning with $41 and a very clear idea of what she was leaving and no idea at all of what she was walking toward. She woke up the first 3 mornings and reached for a bell that was not there. She caught herself twice mentally planning a menu for people who were 62 miles away. On the 4th night, she sat on the edge of a narrow bed in a rented room and thought about the fact that no one in the world knew where she was, and that if she died in her sleep, it would take a stranger to find her. And she waited to be frightened. She was not frightened. That was the thing that undid her. She sat there waiting for terror, and what came instead was a quiet so deep and so unfamiliar that it took her a full minute to recognize it as rest. She put her face in her hands and cried for 11 minutes. Then she washed her face, went downstairs, and asked Pearl Dunbar if there was any work in that town for a woman who could read, write, keep books, and set a broken fever. Pearl set down her coffee. You can keep books. I kept an 1,100-acre estate for 7 years. You did what? I kept the accounts, the household, the tenants, the physician's bills, and the winter provisioning, Elizabeth said. I did it in a small ledger in a bottom drawer, and I balanced to the penny. Pearl stared at her. Ma'am, what in God's name are you doing in Sutton's Ford? I'm having breakfast, Elizabeth said. The school opened again on the second Monday because of her. It had been shut since June, when the schoolmaster went off to Baltimore and never wrote back. 14 children in that town had been running loose all summer, and half the parents had given up on the whole idea. Elizabeth found out about it on a Saturday and had the church swept by Sunday afternoon. You can't just open a school, said the man who kept the general store. Why not? There's a committee. When does the committee meet? It ain't met since May. Then I'll open the school, Elizabeth said, and the committee can meet about it afterward. 9 children came the first day, 12 the second. By the end of that week, she had 19, including 2 grown men who came in the evening after work and sat in chairs built for 8-year-olds and learned to sign their own names instead of making a mark. One of them was a blacksmith named Jonah Reed. He was a wide, slow-talking widower of about 40, with a daughter named Sarah Jane, who was 9 and had not spoken more than a dozen words to anybody since her mother died. He came the first evening and stood in the doorway too long. Ma'am? Mr. Reed? I ain't here for me. All right. I'm here for me, he admitted. But I'd rather it got around I was here for the girl. Then that is what will get around, Elizabeth said. He sat down. 2 weeks later, Sarah Jane Reed raised her hand in that schoolroom and asked a question out loud, and Jonah Reed had to walk outside and stand in the road with his hat off for a minute before he could come back in. He caught Elizabeth after. "Ma'am?" "Yes. How'd you do it?" "Do what?" "She ain't talked in 2 years. Not to her aunt, not to the preacher, not to me." Elizabeth thought about it. "I asked her a question," she said. "That's all. I asked her a question, Mr. Reed, and then I waited. People will tell you almost anything if you're willing to wait longer than they expect." Jonah Reed turned his hat around in his hands. "Somebody didn't wait for you," he said. Elizabeth looked up. "I beg your pardon." "I ain't prying, ma'am." "You are a little." "Yes, ma'am, I am." He put the hat on. "I just know what it looks like when a person's used to nobody waiting." He went out. Elizabeth stood alone in that empty church and put her hand flat on a child's desk and did not move for a long time. The 20th day was when William found the second set of books. He had been going through her ledgers every night. That had become the shape of his life. Supper alone, and then the morning room floor, and then her handwriting until the candle went out. He knew the households now. He knew that the Carters were 3 years behind, and she had never once written it down as a debt. He knew that a woman named Alma Pike had been given $4 a month for 2 years, and that the entry beside it said only, "She will not say why, and I will not ask." And on the 20th night he found a ledger that was not the estate's. It was smaller, older, and it was in her father's hand for the first 30 pages, and hers after that. It was her own money, Whitmore money. $6,200 left to her by a father who had loved her enough to make sure it could never be touched by a husband. And William Harrington sat on the floor and worked his way down those pages and felt the blood leave his face. Because it was not sitting there. It had been spent. April 1814. To the mill. $400. W. Does not know the second wheel failed. If the mill closes in spring, the men do not eat. November 1815. $1,100 against the Richmond note. W believes his father's investment paid out. It did not. It will not. February 1816. 200. Taxes. August 1816. 600. The roof of the east barn and the 2 mares. W wanted the mares. January 1817. 900. The Richmond note again. He turned the pages faster. $4,800 of her own money spent over 6 years on a man who had spent that same 6 years telling his friends he had married a plain girl with nothing to recommend her. And on the last used page in that small clear hand, I have $1,400 remaining. I am keeping it. I have never kept anything before, and I find that I am not ashamed of it. William Harrington read that line and started laughing, and the laughing turned into something else about 4 seconds in, and Hattie Boone heard it from the hall for the second time in that house, and for the second time she did not go in. He rode to Richmond in the morning. He went to the bank his father had used for 30 years, and he put the ledger on the desk and said, "I need to know if this is true." The clerk went and got a man, and the man went and got an older man, and the older man came out with a face like a funeral. "Mr. Harrington? Is it true?" "Sir, I'd hoped this conversation would never happen." "Answer me." The banker sat down. "Your father's Richmond investment failed in the autumn of 1815. Entirely. The note came due in November of that year, and this house had no way to meet it." And a woman came in on a Thursday morning," the banker said. "By herself, in a plain coat. She had come 60 miles by coach, and she sat in that chair you are sitting in, and she asked me what it would take to keep her husband from finding out." William could not speak. "I told her $1,100. She wrote it out of her own account." The banker took off his spectacles. "And then she asked me a question I have never in 30 years been asked by anyone." "What?" "She asked if it would embarrass him, if he found out." The banker looked at him. She said, and I remember it exact, he is a proud man. It would injure him. Can it be done so that it looks like the investment paid? William put both hands on the edge of that desk. She came back 3 times, the banker said. Every time it was the same. Every time she asked me the same question. And every time I told her, yes, madam, it can be arranged so he never knows. You should have told me. She was my client, sir, not you. I am her husband. Yes, the banker said, and he said it in a way that took the word apart and put it back together as something considerably smaller. So she mentioned. William stayed in Richmond that night because he could not make himself get back on the road, and he sat in an inn and drank nothing at all, which was the first unusual thing he had done in years. He kept coming back to one line. Can it be done so that it looks like the investment paid? She had ridden 60 miles alone to protect a man's pride from a failure he did not even know he'd had. And then she had gone home and set his table and listened to him tell a room full of people that she was a chair he could have replaced. He said out loud to an empty room, "What kind of woman does that?" And then a minute later, quieter, "What kind of man lets her?" Caroline Pemberton came to the estate on the 24th day. She came with her mother, which meant it was a call and not a visit. And William received them in the front room because it was the only room in that house that did not have Elizabeth in it. Mrs. Pemberton did all the talking for 9 minutes. The weather, the roads, the dreadful business of the Fairfax wedding. Then she said, "You must be very lonely, Mr. Harrington." "I manage." "A house this size?" "Yes." A man does need looking after. And William Harrington, who 2 months earlier would have understood exactly what was being offered and would have enjoyed being offered, it felt his stomach turn over. "Mrs. Pemberton?" "Yes." "Your daughter is 19 years old. Caroline is very sensible for her age." "I'm sure she is." He stood up. "Take her home." "I beg your pardon." "Take her home, ma'am, and don't bring her here again." Mrs. Pemberton went scarlet. "Well, I'm sure I said a great many things at that table that I regret," William said, "but the one I regret most is that I made every man in that room think a wife was a thing you could trade in when the shine came off. I'd rather not prove myself right." They left in something less than a hurry. But Caroline Pemberton stopped in the hall, and she waited until her mother was outside, and she turned around. "Mr. Harrington?" "Miss Pemberton." "May I say something ugly?" "I imagine you're going to. I've thought about that supper every day," she said. "Every single day." "Do you know why?" "No." "Because I'm 19, and I'm going to be married inside of 2 years to whoever my father decides on." Her voice shook, and she pushed straight through it. "And I sat at your table, and I watched a good woman find out what her husband says about her when he thinks she can't hear. And I thought that's going to be me. In 7 years, that's going to be me, and I won't even be surprised." William did not have one word to say. "She curtsied to us," Caroline said. "After all that. She curtsied to us and told my mother there was a warming pan in my bed because I take cold." She wiped her face with the back of her glove. "You didn't just embarrass her, sir. You taught every woman in that room exactly what she's worth." She went out. That was the 24th day, and it was the night William Harrington stopped trying to find his wife in order to bring her back. He wrote it down, which was not a thing he had ever done. He sat at her little desk in the morning room, and he opened a blank ledger of his own, and he wrote, "I do not know one single thing about her." And underneath it, he started a list. He wrote down everything he could remember, her ever saying that he had not bothered to hear. It took him 4 hours, and he filled 2 pages, and every line of it was worse than the one before. She stopped playing the pianoforte in the spring of 1815. I never asked why. The Richmond note came due in November of 1815. She must have known by spring. She goes down to the row houses on Thursdays. She has an aunt, her mother's sister. I do not know the name. She likes the orchard. 7 years, and I know 4 things. He put down the pen. Then he picked it back up and wrote one more line at the bottom of the page, and it was the first honest sentence William Harrington had written in his life. I did not marry a quiet woman. I married a woman who learned very fast that speaking got her nothing in this house. The next morning he called Hattie into the morning room. Sit down. Sir, I don't. Hattie, sit down. She sat on the edge of the chair like it might bite her. How long have you been in this house? 41 years, sir. You raised me. Your mother raised you. I fed you. You raised me, William said. And I want you to tell me the truth about something, and I want you to know before you answer that I'm not going to like it, and I'm not going to punish you for it. Hattie folded her hands. All right. Was she unhappy? The old woman looked at him for a long moment. No, sir, she said. That'd have been easier. What does that mean? Unhappy is a thing you can fix. A person that's unhappy will fight you and cry and slam a door, and that's how you know they still figure it's worth the trouble. Hattie shook her head slowly. That woman wasn't unhappy, Mr. Harrington. She was finished. There's a difference, and I watched it happen, and God forgive me, I never said nothing. When? When what, sir? When did she finish? Hattie thought. Christmas of 1816. She said. What happened at Christmas of 1816? You don't recall? No. No, sir, Hattie said. I didn't reckon you would. She smoothed her apron. She spent 5 weeks on that Christmas. 5 weeks. She made you a shirt with her own hands, and she wasn't no good at needlework, so she done it over 3 times and pricked her fingers so bad she had to wear gloves to the table. And Christmas morning she give it to you in front of your mother and your uncle. And you held it up, Hattie said, and you laughed and you said, well, it ain't Richmond tailoring, but I reckon it'll do for the barn. William sat back in his chair. And everybody laughed 'cause you laughed, Hattie said. And she laughed too, sir. That's the part. She laughed right along with you. And then she went out to the kitchen and stood at my sink with her hands in the cold water, and she didn't make a sound. And after a while she said, Hattie, that is the last thing I am ever going to make him. Stop. You asked. I know I asked. She never made you another thing, Hattie said. Ever. You get that shirt out of your wardrobe and look at the stitching sometime, Mr. Harrington. It's crooked as a creek. She done it 3 times. William got up and walked to the window and stood there with his back to the room. Hattie? Sir? I have been a small man in a large house. Hattie Boone did not contradict him. That was in its own way the loudest thing anybody said in that county all autumn. The word about Sutton's Ford came from a place he never expected. It came on the 29th day in the form of Dr. Reeves riding up the lane at 8 in the morning and this time getting down off his horse. Harrington. Reeves. I've had a letter. William's whole body went still. From her? No, from a physician up north, fellow named Atwater. He and I trained together in Philadelphia. Reeves pulled it out of his coat. He writes to me twice a year about nothing at all. This time he wrote to ask if I could spare a formulary. Reeves, he said, and I'll read you the words. We have a woman here who has taken over half my visiting without a day of training, and she is better at the sitting up than I am, and I would like to give her something to read so I can stop feeling like a fraud. William put his hand on the porch rail. Where? Now hold on. Reeves, where? I said hold on. The doctor folded the letter and put it away. I'm going to tell you, but first you're going to answer me one question, and I want you to think about it, because I have known that woman 4 years, and I would not hand her over to the devil himself. Ask it. What are you going to do when you find her? I'm going to bring her home. Reeves nodded slowly and put his foot back in the stirrup. Wait. No, sir. I don't believe I will. Reeves, for God's sake. The doctor swung up into the saddle. That's the wrong answer, Harrington. That's the answer of a man who's lost a thing and wants it back on the shelf. He gathered the reins. You come find me when you've got a different one. He rode out, and William Harrington stood on his own porch and shouted after him at the top of his lungs in front of his own house and every soul working near it. "Then tell me the right one." Reeves pulled up. He turned that horse around and came back at a walk, and he stopped 6 feet away and looked down at the man he had known since birth. "There ain't a right one I can give you," he said. "That's the whole point. If I hand you the words, they're my words, and she'll know it inside of a minute. That woman has spent 7 years listening to everything you didn't say. You think she can't hear a borrowed sentence? Then what do? You go be a different man for a while," Reeves said. "Not a week, not till she comes back, a while. And then maybe I'll tell you where she is, or maybe she'll be somebody else's business by then, and you'll have to live with that too." He turned the horse again. "Sutton's Ford," Reeves said without looking back. William's head came up. "What? You heard me. I'm 61 years old, and I've decided I ain't God." The doctor rode a few paces and stopped one last time. "But if you go up there and knock on her door tomorrow talking about what you've lost, I'll ride up myself and put you back on your horse. You go when you've got something to bring besides sorry." Then he was gone down the lane, and William Harrington was left standing in front of his house with the name of a town in his mouth and no earthly idea what to do with it. He did not go the next day. He did not go that week. He hauled 12 loads of wood down to the row houses on a Tuesday, and he did not tell anybody it was surplus, and he did not tell anybody it wasn't. He learned Samuel Ward's daughter's name. He paid Dr. Reeves 17 months of other people's bills and made him swear not to say where it came from, and Reeves looked at him for a long moment and said, "Now you're stealing her tricks." And William said, "Yes, I am." And the doctor let it go. He read her ledgers until he could have recited them, and on the 40th night alone in the morning room, William Harrington finally turned to the very last page of the very last book, the one he had been saving without admitting he was saving it, and he found 4 lines written the night before the supper. 32 coming tomorrow. The pears are done. Mrs. Ashford at the end of the table away from the yellow. "I have decided I will speak tomorrow night, just once. I will say something at that table and let them all hear my voice. I have been practicing it in the orchard like a girl. If he takes my hand under the table, I will know it was worth staying." He read those 4 lines 11 times. Then he set the ledger down on the floor and sat very still and did the arithmetic backward, the way a man checks a sum he already knows is wrong. "If he takes my hand under the table, I will know it was worth staying." She had written that the night before, which meant that at some point during that supper she had been waiting, not sitting quietly at the far end because she had nothing to say. Waiting, counting the minutes, practicing something in her head that she had practiced out loud in the orchard like a girl. And William Harrington closed his eyes and went back to that table, and it came to him whole, and it was so much worse than he could have imagined, because she had spoken. She had. Early on, before the wine went twice around, when Judge Ashford was talking about the price of horses, and the table was still civil, a voice from the far end had said, "Actually, I believe the Fairfax mare was sold in the spring, not the summer, because I remember the—" And William Harrington had said without even turning his head, "Elizabeth, let the judge finish." He got up off that floor so fast the ledger slid. "Hattie!" He was already in this hall. He was already shouting, "Hattie!" She came out of the kitchen with a towel in her hands and her heart in her throat, because a man does not holler like that in a house unless somebody has died. "Sir, what in the—" That night, he had the ledger in his fist. "The supper. Were you in the room?" "I was in and out, sir." "Did she speak?" Hattie went still. "Sir? Did my wife try to say something at that table before I opened my mouth about her?" Hattie Boone looked at the floor, and then she looked up, and she gave it to him straight, because she had decided some weeks earlier that she was done being gentle with him. "Yes, sir." "Once?" "Twice, sir." He put his hand out and caught the doorframe. "Twice. First was the horses. You told her to let the judge finish." Hattie's voice did not waver. "Second was about an hour on. Mrs. Ashford asked her something about the orchard, and she started to answer, and you called down the table for more wine, and everybody turned to look at you, and by the time they turned back, she'd already said, 'Never mind.'" "I don't remember that." "No, sir, you wouldn't." "Why wouldn't I?" "Because you was busy being the reason everybody turned. Hattie said. He stood there holding the doorframe. She was going to speak, he said. She wrote it down. She was going to speak that night and I shut her up twice. And then I told 30 people she had no conversation. Hattie folded the towel. That's about the size of it, sir. He did not eat that day. At 4 in the afternoon, he went into the front parlor and stood in the corner by the north window, and he looked at that corner for a long time, and then he called for Hattie again. There was a pianoforte here. Yes, sir. Her mother's. Yes, sir. It went to Richmond to be repaired in the spring of 1815. Hattie didn't answer. Hattie. Sir, don't ask me that. Where is the pianoforte? Mr. Harrington. Where is my wife's pianoforte? Hattie Boone took a breath that seemed to come up from somewhere under the house. She sold it, sir. He heard it, and he still asked again the way people do. She what? She sold it in April of 1815 to a family in Fredericksburg for $110, and she paid the county tax with it, and she told you it went off to be repaired. Hattie's chin came up. And you never asked after it? Not once. 3 years, sir. 3 years, and you walked past that empty corner every day of your life, and you never once said, "Where's the piano?" She waited for you to ask. Hattie's voice cracked, and she let it. 6 months she waited. She'd sit in here of an evening with her sewing right there where it used to stand, and I'd bring the tea, and I could see her waiting, and then one day she quit sitting in here altogether. William turned around and put his forehead against the window frame. Spring of 1815, he said. Yes, sir. She stopped playing in the spring of 1815. She stopped having something to play on, Hattie said. Ain't the same thing, and you'd have knowed the difference if you'd asked her one question in 7 years. He left for Sutton's Ford the next morning. He was in the yard before 6 with a horse saddled and a bag tied on, and Hattie came out with her shawl over her nightclothes and stopped him. Sir, I'm going. I know you're going. Take this. She held out a bundle wrapped in brown paper and string. What is it? Open it up the road a ways. Hattie, open it up the road, she said, and I'd be obliged if you didn't do it where I got to watch. He opened it 4 miles on, sitting on his horse at a crossroads, and it was the shirt. Crooked stitching down the whole left seam. 2 buttons set a half-inch off from each other. A collar that had been taken apart and put back together 3 separate times by a woman who was no good at needlework, and who had done it anyway in December with her fingers wrapped in cloth so nobody would see the pinpricks at the table. Well, it ain't Richmond tailoring, but I reckon it'll do for the barn. William Harrington sat on that horse at that crossroads and put the shirt on over his own. He wore it the whole 62 miles. Pearl Dunbar knew who he was before he got his hat off. No, ma'am, I haven't asked you anything yet. You're going to ask for a room, and the answer's no. You don't know my name. I know your face, Pearl said. You got the exact face of a man who's about a month too late for something, and there's only one man in this world that description fits, so you can turn around. I'll pay double. Mister, I have buried 2 husbands. Do you know what that does for a woman's opinion of money? He stood in her front hall with his hat in his hand. Is she well? Pearl folded her arms. Why? Because I've come 62 miles, and I'd like to know if she's well, and then I'll go sit in the road if that's what you want. Something in that answer must have landed because Pearl Dunbar looked at him for a good 10 seconds longer than was comfortable. She's well. Thank you. She's better than well, Pearl said. That's the part you ain't going to like. Ma'am? She come up those steps the second day with 1 bag and a face like a woman who'd been holding her breath since she was 24. Pearl leaned on the newel post, and I have watched her let it out, a little at a time. She laughs now, mister, out loud, in the kitchen. She laughs so hard at my stories she has to put her cup down. William's jaw worked. I've never heard her laugh like that. I know you ain't, Pearl said. That's exactly what I'm telling you. She gave him the back room over the kitchen, which was the worst room in the house, and smelled of onions, and she charged him $1 and made a point of saying she'd have charged anybody else 50 cents. One thing, Pearl said at the door. Yes, ma'am. You don't go to that school. Ma'am, you don't go near that school. 19 children in there, and half their mamas would climb out a window for her. You want to see her? You wait till she's got no children in front of her and no work in her hands, and you let her see you coming from a distance so she's got time to fix her face. She shut the door. He waited 3 days. That was the hardest 3 days of his life, and it was also the first thing he had ever done, purely because it was the right way to do it, and not because it got him something. He watched from a distance like she was a stranger, which, as it turned out, she was. He watched her come out of that church at 4 in the afternoon with children hanging off both arms. He watched her stop in the road and crouch down to hear something a small boy had to tell her. And he watched her stay crouched down for a good 2 minutes, because whatever the boy had to say, he was slow in getting it out, and she was in no hurry at all. People will tell you almost anything if you're willing to wait longer than they expect. He watched her laugh. Pearl had been right, and it was worse than being told. She laughed with her whole face. She laughed at something the miller's wife said, and she put her hand on the woman's arm, and William Harrington stood 100 yards off in a borrowed coat, and understood that he had been married for 7 years to a woman he had never once seen. And on the third afternoon, he watched a wide, slow-moving blacksmith come out of his shop, wipe his hands, and walk her home. Not close, not touching. Half a step behind and to the left. The way a man walks when he has decided he is going to be careful about something for as long as it takes. Jonah Reed found him that evening. He came into Pearl's yard, filling up most of the gate, and he said, "You're Harrington." "I am," I figured. "Are you here to hit me?" Jonah Reed thought about it honestly, which was somehow worse. "I did consider it. You'd be within your rights." "That ain't how right is work, mister." Jonah leaned against the fence. "And she'd not thank me for it. She don't hold with a man solving things with his hands. She told me that the second week." "What did you say to her?" "I said sometimes hands is all a man's got," Jonah said. "And she said then learn a second thing." William almost smiled. He caught it before it got out. "Mr. Reed." "Jonah." "Jonah, may I ask you something?" "You can ask." "Has she spoken about me?" "Not one word," Jonah said. "Not once." "Mister, that woman has been in this town 8 weeks. In 8 weeks, she has learned the name of every child in it, and the name of every child's grandmother, and which houses got a leak, and which man drinks. And in 8 weeks, she ain't said your name one single time." He shifted his weight. "You know what that is. Anger." "No, sir. Anger'd be talking." Jonah shook his head. "That's a woman who put a thing down and don't intend to pick it back up." William held onto the porch rail. "My daughter," Jonah said. "I'm sorry. Sarah Jane, she's 9. She quit talking when her mama passed 2 years back come February." He said it flat the way men do when the alternative is not being able to say it at all. "Preacher tried. Her aunt tried. I tried till I couldn't stand the sound of my own voice no more. And your wife asked her a question and then sat there and waited." Jonah's throat moved. "And now that child talks my ear off from supper time till she falls asleep. Last Tuesday she asked me what my mama's name was. Ain't nobody asked me that in 20 years. He straightened up off the fence. "So I want you to understand where I stand," Jonah Reed said. "And I ain't going to dress it up. I don't wish you harm. I don't. But if you have come up here to take that woman back to a house where she's got to be small, then you and me are going to have a considerable difficulty. I haven't come to take her anywhere." "Then what did you come for?" And William Harrington gave the only answer he had, which was, "I don't know yet." Jonah Reed looked at him for a long moment. "Well," he said, "that's the first honest thing anybody said in this yard." She came to him. That was the thing he had not prepared for. He had rehearsed 100 versions of walking up to her, and in the end she found out he was in town by supper time of the 4th day, and she came across the road to Pearl Dunbar's front steps at 7 in the evening, with her hands folded in front of her and no expression on her face at all. "William." He stood up so fast he knocked the chair over. "Elizabeth, Pearl says you've been here 4 days. "I have." "She says you asked if I was well." "I did." "And then you didn't come." "No." "Why not?" And here it was. The whole thing all at once and no time to get it right. "Because Dr. Reeves told me not to come until I had something to bring besides sorry," William said. "And I've been sitting in that room 4 days trying to work out whether I've got anything. And I don't believe I do." Elizabeth's expression did not change. "May I sit down?" she asked. "It's your—" He stopped. "Yes, please." She sat on the top step. He picked up his chair and set it back on its legs and did not sit in it. "How is Hattie?" "Furious," William said. "Mostly with me." "Good. She's well. She asks after you every day, and I've got nothing to tell her. Tell her I have 19 children in a church and a landlady who says I don't hold with foolishness. She'd like that." "She would." There was a silence. "You're wearing the shirt," Elizabeth said. He had forgotten. He looked down at his own sleeve like it belonged to somebody else. Hattie gave it to me the morning I left. Why are you wearing it? Because I laughed at it, William said. In front of my mother and my uncle. And you laughed too. And then you went and stood at the sink and told Hattie it was the last thing you'd ever make me. And it was. Elizabeth's hands tightened very slightly in her lap. She told you that. She told me a great deal. She had no business. She had 7 years of business, William said, and she kept every bit of it because she was frightened of me, and that is a thing I'll be answering for. Elizabeth looked out at the road. You've come to apologize. Yes. Then say it and go home, William. That's not... No, I want you to hear how it sounds. She turned and looked at him straight on for the first time, and her voice was perfectly level, which was the most frightening thing about it. You have come 62 miles because your house is cold and your table is empty, and nobody in the county will speak to you. You have discovered that a great many things I did were useful, and now you want to say a word to me and have it fix a thing that took 7 years to build. Elizabeth, you came because you lost your comfort. No? Then why? Because I read your ledgers, William said. She went very still. I read all 4, he said. And then I found the other one, the small one in your father's hand with your money in it. You had no right. I had no right to any of it. Not the money, not the years, not you. His voice broke down the middle, and he kept going anyway. $4,800, Elizabeth. The mill. The Richmond note. Twice. The mares. You bought me 2 mares. Stop. You rode 60 miles by yourself to a bank in Richmond, and you asked a man you'd never met if it could be arranged, so it wouldn't embarrass me. Elizabeth stood up. I said stop. Why? He came off the porch after her. Why would you do that? Why would you spend your father's money on a man who... Because I thought that was what it was for. It came out of her like something coming through a wall. It was the first time in 7 years that Elizabeth Whitmore had raised her voice, and it went across that road and into 2 open windows and stopped a man walking his mule. Because that is what I was told a wife is, she said. That is what my mother did and her mother before her. You give and you keep giving and you do it so quietly that he never has to feel the weight of it. And one day he looks up and he sees you. Elizabeth, that was the whole bargain, William. That was the entire arrangement. I held up my end of it for 7 years and I did it perfectly. Her hands were shaking now and she made no attempt to hide them. I never asked. I never complained. I never once made you feel poor or foolish or unloved. And you stood up at my table and told your friends I could be replaced by a chair. I know. You do not know. Then tell me. No, Elizabeth said. Elizabeth, please. No, that is exactly the thing. She stepped back from him. You want me to explain it to you now? You want me to sit down and lay it all out so you can understand, and then you'll feel it, and then it will be over, and I will have done one more piece of work for you. She wiped her face with the flat of her hand hard, like she was angry at it. I am done explaining myself to you, she said. That is the only thing I have taken from that house. She walked back across the road. He did not follow her. He sat down on Pearl Dunbar's steps in his crooked shirt and stayed there until it was full dark, and when Pearl came out with a lamp, she found him sitting there, and she did not say one unkind word. She sat down beside him and said, well, yes, ma'am, you got hollered at. I did. Mr. Pearl Dunbar said, in 8 weeks that woman ain't raised her voice to a soul, not to a child, not to a drunk, not to me, and I have provoked her twice on purpose to see if she would. I'm not sure that's a comfort. It ain't a comfort, it's information. She set the lamp down. There's things a person will only shout at somebody that matters. You just found out where you stand, and it ain't where you thought, and it ain't nowhere good neither. It's just a lot closer than nothing. The sickness came into Sutton's Ford 8 days later. It came the way it always came. Quiet at first, a child kept home on a Monday, and 2 more on the Tuesday. And by Thursday, there were 11 of them, and a word nobody wanted to say out loud. And Dr. Atwater's horse was standing saddled outside somebody's door at every hour of the day and night. Putrid sore throat. Elizabeth Whitmore shut the school on Thursday morning and went to work. She did not consult anybody. She did not wait for a committee. She walked into Atwater's surgery and said, "How many can you cover in a day?" And the old man said, 9, maybe 10. And she said, "Then give me the ones you can't reach and tell me what to look for." Ma'am, you've had no training. I have sat up with fever 40 times. This is not fever. Then teach me the difference in the next 10 minutes, Elizabeth said. Because there is a woman on the Colton Road with 3 children in one bed and she has nobody. William found out about it from Pearl at noon. He was on his horse in 6 minutes. He rode down to the church where they had begun carrying the worst cases because it was the only building in that town with a floor big enough, and he walked in, and there she was on her knees beside a straw tick with her sleeves rolled up past her elbows. She looked up. Go home, William. No, this is not. Tell me what to carry. She stared at him. What? You've got 4 families out on the Colton Road and 1 horse between you and Atwater, he said. I have a horse. I have 2 hands. I have never done a useful thing in my life, and I do not know how to do any of this, so tell me what to carry and where to put it, and I will not ask you one single question, and I will not say one word about anything else. Elizabeth looked at him for 4 full seconds. Water, she said. Clean water all day from the north well and not the creek. And lime. And you will burn what I tell you to burn, and you will not argue about it because some of it will be things people love. Yes. And William. Yes. If you are doing this so that I will see you doing it, she said, go home now, because I have not got the strength to watch a man perform. I'm not performing. We'll find out, Elizabeth said and went back to the child. They found out. He hauled water for 9 days. He hauled it from the north well in 2 buckets on a yoke like a hired man up and down that road 40 times a day, and by the 3rd day, the skin was off both his shoulders, and he did not mention it to anybody. He burned bedding in a pit behind the church. He dug graves. That was the part nobody had told him about. On the 5th day, a family named Colton lost a boy of 4, and there was no one to dig for them, and William Harrington of the Harrington estate, 1,100 acres and 2 mills, took a spade off a wall and dug a child's grave in cold ground for 3 hours, and then stood back so the father could be first at the edge of it. The father said, Mister, what do I owe you? And William said, not one thing in this world, and walked back to the well. Dr. Atwater came looking for him on the 6th night. You're the husband. I am. She told me you were a fool. She's right. She did not say it that way, Atwater said. She said, and I'm giving it to you exact because I think you ought to have it, she said. He is not a cruel man. He is a man who was never once required to notice anybody, and by the time it mattered, he had lost the ability. William set down the buckets. When did she say that? Tuesday. I asked her why she let you stay. The old doctor rubbed his eyes. Son, I have been doing this 40 years, and I have never seen anybody work like that woman is working. She has not slept above 3 hours in a night since Thursday week. If somebody don't stop her, I will have 2 funerals to attend, and one of them will be hers. She won't listen to me. No. Atwater agreed. But you might be the only man in this town willing to stand in front of her and get run over. Sarah Jane Reed took sick on the 8th day. Jonah carried her into that church himself, all 49 pounds of her, and he would not put her down until Elizabeth put her hands on his arms and said his name twice. Jonah. She was fine this morning. She was fine at breakfast. She was talking about the... Jonah, put her down. Right here, I have you. He put her down, and then he knelt on that floor beside her and did not move for 6 hours. By midnight, the child could not swallow. By 2 in the morning, Atwater came out into the road where William was standing with the buckets and said, I've got nothing else. I have used everything I have. What does she need? She needs a man who has seen 400 of these, and I have seen 60. Atwater's hands were shaking. There's a fellow in Fredericksburg, Cabell. He worked the Baltimore outbreak in 1811, and he has a method with the throat that I have only read about. How far? 51 miles. Give me a letter. Son, it is 2 in the morning, and it's near freezing, and there is no man alive who can... Write the letter, William said. He rode out at 2:20. He rode it in 11 hours, changed horses twice on his own name and once on his father's, and got to Fredericksburg at 1:30 in the afternoon, and walked into Dr. Cabell's house without knocking, and put the letter in his hand and said, There is a 9-year-old girl in Sutton's Ford who has been dying since midnight, and I have a fresh horse for you outside. Cabell read it. Who is the child to you? Nothing, William said. She's nothing to me at all. Her father is a blacksmith who told me he'd fight me if I ever tried to make my wife small again, and I have thought about that man every day since. Cabell got his bag. They rode back through the night and got in at 4 in the morning of the 10th day, and Cabell went straight into that church and worked on Sarah Jane Reed for 2 hours and 11 minutes with Elizabeth holding the lamp and Jonah holding the child's hands. At 6:10, the girl coughed and drew a full breath. Jonah Reed made a sound that a person does not forget, and Elizabeth Whitmore set down the lamp and walked out the side door of that church and got about 15 feet before her legs quit. William caught her. That was all. He was standing there because he had been standing there for 2 hours with nothing to carry, and she came out and went down, and he got both arms under her before she hit the ground. Let go. No. William let go of me. No, ma'am. She was fighting him, and there was nothing in it. 11 days of no sleep and no food to speak of, and she was pushing at his chest with both hands and getting nowhere. And then all at once, she stopped pushing and grabbed 2 fistfuls of that crooked shirt instead and put her face against it and came apart. It was not quiet. That was the thing that broke him, and he would think about it for the rest of his life. It was not quiet at all. 7 years of a woman crying so softly that a house full of people never heard it, and it all came up at once in the side yard of a church in Sutton's Ford at 6 in the morning, and it was loud and it was ugly and it went on for a long time. He did not say a word. He had 100 of them ready. He had been building sentences for 11 weeks. He did not use one. He stood there and held her up and let her ruin the front of that shirt. And when she finally quit and stepped back and wiped her face with both hands, she said the first thing that came into her head, which was, "I have been so tired." "I know. You don't." "No." He agreed. "I don't." Elizabeth laughed. It came out wrecked and half a sob. "That," she said, "is the first time you have ever said that to me. I'm told I've got a lot of firsts left." She looked at him, really looked in the gray light at a man with the skin off his shoulders and 11 days of beard and her own crooked stitching soaked through the front. "Why did you ride to Fredericksburg?" "Because Atwater said there was a man there." "That is not what I asked." "I know it isn't." "Then answer me." And William Harrington said, "Because I have spent my whole life being a person that things get done for, and I found out that I would rather be the one that does it. That's all. That's the whole of it. It has got nothing to do with you, and I would have gone if you had never been in that church." Elizabeth stood there a long moment. "That," she said quietly, "is the best answer you have ever given me. Does it change anything?" "No," she said, and she went back inside. The sickness broke on the 14th day. 9 children in that town had died. Sarah Jane Reed was not one of them, and neither were the 3 Colton girls, and neither was the boy on the Miller place, whom Elizabeth had sat up with 4 nights running. On the 16th day, Sutton's Ford held a supper in the church to bury the grief and thank the living. They made Elizabeth sit at the head of the table. She did not want it. She said so twice. Pearl Dunbar told her to hush and sit down, and 19 children and 40 grown people made such a noise about it that she gave in. And halfway through that supper, the man who kept the general store stood up with his cup and said, "I want to say a thing." The room went quiet. "When she come here in the fall, I told her she couldn't open no school on account of there was a committee." He looked at the floor. "And she says to me, I'll open it, and the committee can meet about it afterward." Laughter went around the room thick and wet. "Well, the committee never did meet." He raised the cup. "So I reckon I'll say it now on behalf of a committee that don't exist. Ma'am, this town was dying before you got off that coach, and we was too proud and too tired to say so. And you never once made a one of us feel like charity." Every soul in that room stood up. 40 people on their feet in a church for a woman whose own husband had told 30 men she had no charm. William Harrington stood at the very back by the door with his hat in his hands, and did not come forward, and did not say a word, and cried where nobody could see him. And then Jonah Reed stood up. He did not mean to make a speech. Everybody there could see he did not mean to. He got about half up, and then all the way, and he turned that hat around in his hands 3 times. "Ma'am? Mr. Reed? Jonah? Jonah? I ain't good at this." "I know," Elizabeth said gently. "Sit down. You don't have to." "No, ma'am, I got to on account of if I sit down now, I ain't never going to get back up." The room went so quiet you could hear the fire. "You give me my girl back twice," Jonah Reed said. "Once with a question, and once in this room 10 days ago." His voice went, and he hauled it back. "I ain't got much. I got a forge and a house with a bad step and a daughter who talks more than the both of us put together. I ain't got a fine name, and I ain't got acres, and I don't know how to say a pretty thing." He stopped. "But I know how to wait," he said. "You taught me that, and I would wait a considerable while." Nobody in that room breathed. Elizabeth Whitmore sat at the head of that table with 40 people looking at her, and a man in the back by the door, who she knew was there, without ever once having turned her head. And she said, "Jonah." "Yes, ma'am." "Give me time." "Not no." She did not say no. And William Harrington heard it from the doorway, and put his hat on, and walked out into the road. The road out of that church went 2 ways, and he stood in the middle of it for a while before he picked one. Pearl Dunbar found him there. "You heard it." "I heard it." "You going to say something about it?" "What would I say, ma'am?" "You could say the man's a blacksmith with a bad step on his porch." "He's a better man than I am," William said. "That's not humility, that's arithmetic." Pearl pulled her shawl up. She didn't say yes. She didn't say no. No, Pearl admitted. She did not. "Ma'am, in 7 years, I never once gave her a thing she had to think about." He put his hat back on. He did it in 9 weeks with a hat in his hands. He left Sutton's Ford at dawn. He went and told Pearl first because she was the only one who would care about the mechanics of it, and she stood in her doorway in a nightcap and said, "You're running." "No, ma'am. Looks like running from where I'm standing." "If I stay," William said, "she has to decide with me in front of her. Every day. She'll walk out of that school, and there I'll be hauling something looking pitiful, and every single day she'll have to weigh me. And that's just a slower way of standing over a woman," he said. "I did that for 7 years. I'm not doing it in a nicer coat." Pearl Dunbar looked at him a long moment. "Well, I'll be." "Ma'am, nothing. Just, I've been waiting 11 weeks to see if there was a man in there." She stepped back inside. "Turns out there's about half of one. That's more than I started with." "It surely is," Pearl said, and shut the door. He did not say goodbye to Elizabeth. He thought about it for 2 miles, and then he stopped thinking about it, because he understood that a goodbye was just one more thing she would have to carry, and he had spent 7 years handing that woman things to carry. He got home on the 4th day. Hattie Boone came out on the step and looked at him and said, "Lord God." "Hattie." "What happened to your shoulders?" "Water." "What water?" 10 days of it," William said. "There was sickness up there. 9 children died." Hattie's hand went to her mouth. "Is she?" "She's well. She worked 14 days on 3 hours of sleep a night, and she is well, and she is the most respected human being in that town. And you, I dug a grave for a boy of 4, and I rode to Fredericksburg in 11 hours for a doctor," William said. "And it was the only useful fortnight of my life." Hattie stared at him. "You want supper?" "I want to talk to Samuel Ward." "It's near dark, sir." "I know what time it is." Samuel Ward came up to the house at 8 that night, and William Harrington did a thing that man would tell his grandchildren about. He met him at the front door. Not the kitchen door, the front. "Sir, come in." "Mr. Harrington, I got mud too here." "Samuel, I have been carrying buckets for 2 weeks and sleeping in a room that smelled of onions. Come in and sit in a chair." Samuel Ward came in and sat in a chair in the front room of the Harrington house and did not know what to do with his hands. "How many men have we got?" "9, sir." "It was 26 in September." "Yes, sir." "What would it take to get them back?" Samuel looked at him carefully, the way a man looks at a horse he has been kicked by. "Sir, I'll tell you straight, or I won't tell you at all." "Straight." "It'd take more than money, and it'd take longer than you got patience for." "Try me." "All right." Samuel leaned forward. "Roofs. Every row house on the north side leaks and has for 4 years. The Mullen place is the worst, and that's why that boy keeps taking fever. Second thing, a man's got to be able to send for a doctor without it costing him a month. Third thing, and this is the one you ain't going to like. Say it. They got to be able to knock on that kitchen door at 2 in the morning and get a person that ain't going to look at 'em like they crawled out of a ditch." Samuel's jaw set, And sir, ain't nobody in this county believes that's you. William nodded slowly. How many nights a week am I here? Sir, how many nights would I have to be at that door before a man believed it? Samuel Ward sat back. I couldn't say. Guess. A year, Samuel said. Maybe 2. Then it's 2, William said. The roofs went on in December, in weather no sane man works in, and William Harrington was on the Mullen house himself the first day with a hammer in his hand, and Mrs. Mullen came out and stood in her own yard and watched a man who owned 1,100 acres freeze on her roof for 6 hours. At noon, she brought out coffee. He came down for it. Mr. Harrington? Ma'am? I said a hard thing to you in the fall. You said a true thing. I said it hard, though. Mrs. Mullen, I have thought about what you said every week since. He wrapped both hands around the cup. You said when she gave it, it came like a neighbor. When I gave it, it came like a man paying to feel better. She looked at her feet. I ought not have. No, ma'am. You ought to have said it 4 years earlier, and so ought everybody else, William said. This whole county watched me for 7 years, and not one of you said a word, and I want you to know I don't blame you for it. You couldn't afford to. That's what it means to own 1,100 acres. Nobody can afford to tell you what you are. He handed back the cup. How's Thomas? He's better, sir. He's got a name now at least, William said. In my head, I mean. He didn't have one in September. He went back up the ladder. The letter to Richmond went out the first week of January. He rode down himself and sat in the same chair he had sat in when he learned what his wife had done. And he put a paper on the desk and said, I want this done, and I want it done, so it cannot be undone by me. The banker read it. He read it twice. Mr. Harrington. Is it possible? It is possible. It is also extraordinary. Answer the question. Sir, you are asking me to place $4,800 plus 6 years of interest into a trust in your wife's name with 2 trustees who are not you, which you cannot touch, cannot borrow against, and cannot revoke. That's right. And she may spend it as she likes. She may burn it in the road, William said. May I ask what has brought this on? You may not. The banker took off his spectacles. I will ask one thing, and then I'll draw it up. Have you told her? No. You intend to tell her? No. Then how in God's name is she to know? You'll write her, William said. In your hand, not mine, on bank paper. You'll say the account has been settled and the funds returned to her name, and you will not mention me at all. Sir, she will know. She will suspect. That's different. He stood up. If it's got my name on it, it's a gift, and she has to be grateful, and I have spent 7 years making that woman grateful for things that were already hers. This is not a gift. This is a debt. I am paying a debt, and a man does not get thanked for that. The banker sat there for a moment. In 31 years, he said, I have never once enjoyed a conversation in this room. And I have just now enjoyed one. He sold the mares in February. He sold them to Pemberton of all people, which cost him something, and he took the money and put a new wheel in the mill that his wife had paid for in 1814 and never mentioned. Then he went and found Judge Ashford. Not on the porch. He found him at the county sessions in the room where 40 men of that district met 4 times a year to argue about roads and taxes, and he waited until the business was done, and then he stood up. Mr. Harrington, Judge, I'd ask the room for 2 minutes. Men shifted. Somebody coughed. Every soul in that room knew exactly what had happened at that supper table, because there is no such thing as a private humiliation in a county of 900 people. Go ahead, Ashford said. William Harrington looked at the floor and then made himself look up. In October, I said a thing about my wife at my own table in front of 30 people. Some of you were there. The rest of you have heard it repeated, and I expect it's grown some in the telling, and I want to say plain that it does not need to grow. What I actually said was bad enough. Nobody moved. I said she embarrassed me. I said she had no charm and no conversation, and that I could put a chair in her place and no one would notice. Harrington, somebody said. You don't have to. I do have to, and I'd be obliged if you'd let me get through it. He put his hands behind his back. That woman paid the Richmond note in 1815 out of her own money so it would not embarrass me. She sold her mother's pianoforte to pay the county tax, and let me believe it went off to be repaired. She paid Dr. Reeves for 17 families in this district and made him swear never to say her name. She has been in Sutton's Ford since October, and this winter she sat up with a sickness there that took 9 children, and she did it for 14 days on 3 hours of sleep, and the town stood up in a church for her. His voice was not steady, and he did not try to make it steady. I stood up at a table with a glass in my hand and told you all she was nothing, and every man in this room laughed, and I don't hold that against a single one of you, because I set the terms, and you were being polite. That ain't a fair thing to say, a man muttered. No, William said. It ain't fair. It's just true. He picked up his hat. I'm not asking anybody to forgive me. That's not in your gift, and it wouldn't do me any good. I'm asking that when this gets repeated again, and it will, somebody in the room repeats the rest of it too. That's all. She's not here to say it herself, and she wouldn't say it anyway. She never has. He sat down. The room stayed quiet a long time. Then Judge Ashford stood up, 68 years old, and said, I laughed loudest. Heads turned. I want that in the minutes, the judge said. Whatever else goes in. I laughed loudest, and my wife has not looked at me the same way since October, and she is right not to. He sat down, and Dr. Reeves from the back said, Well, that's the first honest county sessions I ever attended in 19 years. And half that room laughed the way men laugh when they have all been holding their breath. Reeves caught him outside. Harrington. Doctor, that was either the bravest thing I ever saw or the stupidest. It was neither. It was late. Reeves walked with him to the horses. You know what you've done, don't you? I've told the truth in a room. You've cut your own throat socially in this county for the next 10 years is what you've done. Reeves shook his head. The Pembertons won't have you. The Fairfaxes won't have you. Half those men will be perfectly civil to your face, and none of them will ever be comfortable with you again on account of you made 'em all remember they were laughing. I know. And you did it anyway. She curtsied to them, William said. After. She curtsied to that whole table and told Mrs. Pemberton there was a warming pan in her daughter's bed. He put his foot in the stirrup. I have been trying for 4 months to think of one thing I could do that costs me as much as that cost her. And I can't. There isn't one. That's the closest I could get. Reeves watched him mount. You want me to write her? No, sir. Harrington, I could have a letter in Sutton's Ford in 3 days telling her exactly what happened in that room. That's precisely why you're not going to. The pianoforte took him until March. He found the family in Fredericksburg through the coach records and the man who had hauled it, and he rode down and knocked and stood in a stranger's parlor looking at his wife's mother's instrument for the first time in 3 years. It's not for sale, the man said. I understand. My daughter learned on it. I understand that too. You're the husband. I am. The man crossed his arms. I bought it fair. I gave the lady $110, and I'll tell you what I remember about it since you've come all this way. She was calm as Sunday. She counted the money twice and thanked me and asked if my daughter played. And when I said she was just starting, that woman sat down at that instrument and played one piece for the child so she'd know what it was supposed to sound like. William had to look away. Then she got up, the man said, and she said, Don't tell her a lady cried over it. Let her just have it. And she went out to the coach. Sir, I will give you $300. I don't want $300. 4. Mister, are you listening to me? No, William admitted. I'm not. I'm sorry. Say it again. The man uncrossed his arms. I said my girl learned on it. She's married now. She's got one of her own. He looked at the instrument. It's been sitting under a sheet for 2 years, and my wife wants it out of the room. Then name it. 110, the man said. Same as I paid. I ain't going to make money off a woman crying in my parlor. It went north on a wagon in the last week of March, packed in straw, with a bill of lading that said it was for the school at Sutton's Ford from a party who did not wish to be named. The driver had instructions, and William made him repeat them twice. If she asks who sent it, I say I don't know, sir. If she asks a second time, I still don't know. If she asks a third time, William said, you say a man in Virginia paid to have it hauled and would not give his name, and then you get on your wagon and go. Yes, sir. And you do not tell her what the tax was for. Sir, I don't know what the tax was for. Good, William said. Keep it that way. Elizabeth Whitmore came out of that church on the 2nd of April and found 4 men and a wagon and a shape under canvas in the road. What is that? Ma'am, it's for the school. We haven't ordered anything for the school. Weren't ordered, was sent. They got the canvas off. She did not say anything for so long that the driver started to get uneasy. Ma'am, is it the wrong article? Elizabeth put her hand flat on the lid. Where did this come from? Fredericksburg, ma'am. Who from? I don't know. Who paid the hauling? A man in Virginia, wouldn't give his name. What did he look like? The driver thought about it, and being an honest man and not a clever one, he said the one true thing that nobody had thought to forbid him. Well, ma'am, he looked wore out. Elizabeth stood there with her hand on that lid. Ma'am, where'd you like it? By the window, she said, where the children can reach it. She did not open it for 6 days. On the 7th day after the school was empty, she sat down on the bench and put her hands on the keys and played 11 notes and stopped. Sarah Jane Reed was standing in the doorway. Mrs. Whitmore. Yes, sweetheart. Why'd you stop? Elizabeth wiped her face with the back of her wrist and turned around and smiled at the child. Because I am out of practice, she said, and there is nobody in this world worth playing badly in front of except you. Come here. I'll show you where Middle C lives. The letter from Richmond came in the same week. It was 3 sentences long, and it was on bank paper, and it did not mention William Harrington anywhere. Elizabeth read it standing in Pearl Dunbar's front hall, and then she sat down on the bottom stair. What is it? Pearl said. Somebody dead. No. You've gone the color of a fish. Pearl, do you know what a trust is? I know what a husband is, and I know what a lawyer is, and I don't want nothing to do with either. Somebody has put $4,800 in my name, Elizabeth said, plus interest, with 2 trustees who are not my husband. He cannot touch it, borrow against it, or take it back. Pearl sat down beside her on the stair. Well, he signed away the right to revoke it. That's a lot of words, honey. What's it mean, plain? Elizabeth looked at the paper. It means that for the first time since I was 24 years old, she said, there is money in this world that a man cannot take from me by walking into a room. Sounds to me like he's buying you. No. Sounds like it. If he were buying me, he'd have signed it, Elizabeth said. He'd have written me 4 pages about what it cost him. That is what he would have done in October. She folded the letter. There isn't a word. There is not one word, Pearl. He gave it back and made sure I would never have to thank him for it. And that's worse. That's much worse, Elizabeth said, and started to cry and got up off that stair and went out the back door before Pearl could say another thing. Jonah Reed did not press her. That was the hell of it. 6 weeks after he had stood up in that church with his hat in his hands, that man had not asked her one time. He walked her home. He fixed the school's step without being asked. He sent Sarah Jane over on a Sunday with a covered dish and a note that said in the careful print of a man who had learned to write at 40, "My girl made this, mostly." And on a Tuesday in April, he stood at the schoolhouse door and said, "Ma'am." Jonah. "That thing come on the wagon." "Yes." "That's from him." Elizabeth put down her chalk. "Yes, I believe it is." "Thought so." "Does it trouble you?" Jonah Reed turned his hat around. "Ma'am, I'm going to say something, and then I'm going to go back to my forge, and I'd take it kind if you didn't answer me today." "All right. I've been thinking about what a man does when he wants a thing." He looked at the floor. A fella like me, I'd have brought you flowers. Or a chair I made. Something with my hands on it so's you'd look at it and think of me. That's what a man does. He puts his name on it. Yes. He didn't put his name on it, Jonah said. That's a hard thing for me to get around. Jonah, no ma'am, let me get it out. He straightened. I told you I'd wait, and I meant it, and I ain't taking it back. But I ain't a fool, and I ain't going to stand here and pretend a man who'd do that don't love you. He put his hat on. I just wanted you to know I seen it too, he said. So you wouldn't have to carry that by yourself. And he went back to his forge. The letter from Virginia came on the 11th of May. It was in Hattie Boone's hand, which Elizabeth had seen perhaps 4 times in 7 years, and the writing was bad because Hattie had learned late and never got easy with it. Ma'am, I am wrote this myself, so it is mine and not his. I have took sick. Dr. Reeves says it is the lungs. He says I am 68, and that is the whole of what he says. I am not asking you to come. I want that plain. I have not never asked you for one thing, and I am not starting. But if you was to want to see me, I would like that very much. H. Boone. Underneath, in a different hand, 3 lines had been started and scratched out so heavily the paper had torn. Then under that, Mrs. Whitmore. Hattie asked me to send this, and I have not read it. I am sending money for the coach and a woman to travel with you, and I will not be at the house when you arrive. W. Harrington. Elizabeth read that last line 4 times. I will not be at the house when you arrive. She was on the coach in 11 hours. He was not at the house when she arrived. He had gone to the North Fields at 4 in the morning and left instructions with the girl in the kitchen and had not been seen since. And Elizabeth Whitmore walked into a house she had run for 7 years and found that she did not know it. The front room had a fire in it, and that was ordinary. But the ledgers were on the table in the morning room, all 4 of them, and the small one besides and beside them was a 5th book she had never seen, and the row houses on the north side had new roofs, and there were 22 men working that place instead of 9, and Samuel Ward's daughter had shoes. She went up the back stairs. Hattie Boone was in her own room with the window open 2 inches because she had always said a shut room was how folks died. And when she saw who was in the doorway, she said, "Well now." "Hattie, don't you start. I haven't started. You got a face on you like a funeral, and I ain't had it yet." Elizabeth crossed that room and sat on the edge of the bed and took both her hands. "You look terrible." "Ain't that a sweet thing to say to a sick old woman?" "You would have said it to me." "I'd have said worse," Hattie said, and laughed, and the laughing turned into coughing, and it went on long enough that Elizabeth put an arm behind her shoulders and held her up until it passed. When it did, Hattie lay back and looked at her. "You got thinner." "I've been working. I heard about the sickness." "Who told you?" "He did." Elizabeth's hands went still. "He come back in November, and he sat down at that kitchen table, and he told me the whole of it," Hattie said. "Every bit. He told me about the water and the graves, and he told me you hollered at him in the road in front of 2 open windows." "He told you that?" "He told me that like it was a Christmas present," Hattie said. "Ma'am, that man come in that door with the skin off both his shoulders, and the first thing he said to me was, 'She's the most respected person in that town.'" Elizabeth looked into the quilt. "Hattie." "Yes'm." "Did he ask you to write that letter?" "No." "Tell me the truth." "I am telling you the truth, and I'd thank you not to ask me twice." Hattie's chin came up sick as she was. "I wrote it. I wrote it myself, and it took me 2 nights, and I hid it under the mattress like a girl. And then I give it to him, and I said, 'You send this and you don't read it.' And he said, 'All right.' And he sent it. He sent it with money for the coach, and a woman to ride with you. And then he went out to that field this morning at 4 o'clock, and ma'am, I want you to hear this part." "What?" "He asked me one question before he went." "What did he ask?" Hattie's eyes filled. "He asked me if you'd want the yellow roses out of the front room," she said. "On account of Mrs. Ashford's eyes water, and he couldn't remember if it was yellow you kept away from or if it was yellow you liked, and he stood in my doorway sick with it." Elizabeth put a hand over her mouth. He said, Hattie, I've read them books 40 times, and it ain't in there. And I can't ask her, so I'm asking you. What did you tell him? I told him it was Mrs. Ashford's eyes, and it weren't nothing to do with you at all. Hattie wiped her face on the sheet. And he said then, I still don't know what she likes. And he went out. Elizabeth sat there. Ma'am? Yes. What do you like? I don't know, Elizabeth said. That ain't an answer. It's the only one I have got, Hattie. Her voice went. In 7 years nobody asked me, and after a while I quit keeping track, and now a man asks, and I sat on a coach for 2 days, and I could not have told you either. Hattie squeezed her hands. Then you got the same work he's got, she said. Ain't that something? She stayed 9 days. She nursed Hattie Boone the way she had nursed 40 people in Sutton's Ford, and on the 4th day the fever came down, and on the 6th, Dr. Reeves said the words, she'll do, and went out into the hall and had to stand there a minute. And in 9 days she did not see William Harrington once. He was in the Northfields before she woke, and he came back after the house was dark, and he ate in the kitchen standing up. And the girl told her all of this without being asked, because the girl thought it was the most romantic thing she had ever heard of, and Elizabeth had to tell her twice to hush. On the 7th night, she went down to the morning room. The 5th ledger was still on the table. She should not have opened it. She knew that. She sat down in her own chair at her own little desk, and she opened her husband's private book, and she read the first line, which was dated the 24th of October, in his own hand. I do not know one single thing about her, and underneath 2 pages of a list. She stopped playing in the spring of 1815. I never asked why. She goes down to the row houses on Thursdays. She has an aunt, her mother's sister. I do not know the name. She likes the orchard. 7 years, and I know 4 things. I did not marry a quiet woman. I married a woman who learned very fast that speaking got her nothing in this house. Elizabeth turned the page. November. 12 loads of wood hauled. Did not say it was surplus. Samuel says a man can tell the difference, and he is right. November. Learned S. Ward's daughter is called Ruth. She had the croup 2 winters ago, and E. sat up with her all night, and then came and set my breakfast table. I asked Ruth today how old she is. She is 7. She was frightened of me. December. Mullen roof. 6 hours. Mrs. Mullen brought coffee out, and I could not drink it for a minute. January. Richmond. It is done, and it cannot be undone, and she will never know it was me, and that is the point. February. Sold the mares. Did not mind it as much as I expected, which tells me something about the mares. March. Fredericksburg. The man would only take what he paid. He said she played 1 piece for his daughter so the child would know how it was supposed to sound, and then she said, do not tell her. A lady cried over it. I sat on a horse outside that house for 20 minutes before I could ride. And then on the last written page, dated 3 days before Hattie sent her letter, Reeves asked me tonight what I am waiting for. I told him I am not waiting for anything. He said every man is waiting for something, and I ought to be honest about it. So here it is, and this book is the only place it goes. I am not waiting for her to come back. I have given that up, and I gave it up in the church at Sutton's Ford when Reed stood up because he asked her for time, and she gave it to him. And a man does not get to hear that and go on pretending. What I am waiting for is to be a person she would have been safe with. That is all that is left to me. If she never sets foot in this house again, I will still be that because it turns out it was never her job to make me into it. She was practicing in the orchard. That is the thing I cannot get past, and I do not expect to. She wrote it down the night before. She had something to say at that table, and she practiced it out loud where nobody could hear her like a girl, and I never did find out what it was. Elizabeth Whitmore closed that book. She sat in the dark in the morning room of the Harrington estate, with her hand flat on the cover, and she was still sitting there at 11:30, when she heard a man come in the kitchen door, tired, careful, trying not to wake anybody. He came through the kitchen and got about 4 steps into the hall before he saw her. He stopped dead. Elizabeth? William? I thought you'd be asleep. I know you did. He stood there. He had come in quiet as a thief in his own house, and now he had nowhere to put himself. How's Hattie? The fever broke Wednesday. Reeves says she'll do. He told me. I saw him on the road. You've been seeing everybody on the road? Yes. 9 days, Elizabeth said. I know how many days it's been. Do you? Every one of them, William said. She did not get up out of that chair. Why? Because you didn't come here for me, he said. You came for Hattie. And if I'd been standing in that hall when you walked in, you'd have had to do something about me before you could go up those stairs. And she's 68 years old, and she was frightened, and you'd have been standing in the hall doing arithmetic about your husband instead of holding her hand. Elizabeth was quiet. That's all it was, he said. It wasn't a scheme. It was a little bit of a scheme. Yes, William admitted. It was a little bit of a scheme. You ate standing up in the kitchen for 9 days. Who told you that? The girl, who thinks it's the finest thing she has ever heard of, and who I have told twice to hush. Something moved across his face that was almost a smile, and did not get all the way there. I'll speak to her. You will not. She's 14 and she's in love with the story, and there's no harm in it. Elizabeth folded her hands. William. Yes. I read your book. He did not move. The 5th one, she said. On the table. I sat down in that chair, and I opened it, and I read every page, and I am not going to apologize for it because you read mine. He put a hand on the back of a chair. That's fair. It is. How far did you get? To the end. He shut his eyes. Elizabeth. You wrote that you sat on a horse outside that man's house in Fredericksburg for 20 minutes before you could ride. I did. Why? Because I had spent 3 years walking past an empty corner in my own parlor, William said, and never once asked where the piano went. And a stranger in Fredericksburg could tell me what my wife said and did, and what her face looked like, and I couldn't have told him one thing about that day. That's why. You paid $110 for it. That's what he'd take. You offered him $400. He wouldn't have it. He said he wasn't going to make money off a woman crying in his parlor. William looked at the floor. There's a man in Fredericksburg I've never seen before in my life who came out of that better than I did. Elizabeth sat with that. And the trust. I won't talk about the trust. You will. No, ma'am, he said. I'll talk about anything else in this house. The roofs, the men, Hattie. I'll answer any question you have got. I will not talk about the money. Why not? Because it isn't a subject, William said. It was a debt. I have been paying you 4% a year on my own comfort for 6 years, and I never once asked where the money came from, and a man doesn't get a conversation out of paying what he owes. He just pays it. You signed away the right to revoke it. I did. Do you understand what that means? It means if you spend the whole of it tomorrow on a house in Sutton's Ford and never speak to me again, there is not one thing I can do about it, William said. Yes, I understand what it means. I made the man read it back to me twice to be sure. Elizabeth's hands tightened in her lap. That was the point, she said. That was the point. She got up then and walked to the table and put 2 fingers on the cover of that 5th ledger. There's a line in here I want to ask you about. All right? You wrote that you gave up waiting for me in the church at Sutton's Ford. I did. When Jonah stood up. Yes. Why then? And William Harrington said, because he asked you for time and you gave it to him. And a man doesn't get to hear that and then go on telling himself a story. That's all. That isn't a small thing, Elizabeth. No, she agreed. It isn't. He's a better man than I am. I want that said plain in this room because I've had 6 months to think about it, and it isn't humility, it's arithmetic. He asked you for nothing for 9 weeks. In 7 years, I never once gave you a thing you had to think about. And he did it in 9 weeks with a hat in his hands. Elizabeth looked at him a long moment. There's one more line. I know which one. Say it anyway. He said it without looking at the book, because he had not needed the book for a long time. She was practicing in the orchard. Yes. I never did find out what it was. Elizabeth's chin came up. Do you want to know? More than I have ever wanted anything, William said. And I'm not going to ask you for it. Why not? Because it's yours, he said. It's about the last thing in this world that is still entirely yours, and if I ask, you'll give it to me. That's what you do. You give. And then I'll have that too, and there'll be nothing left in that orchard that I haven't got my hands on. Elizabeth Whitmore stood very still in that room. You have changed, she said. Not enough. No, she said. But some. She went up the stairs. He stood in the hall a long while after, and then he went out and slept in the north barn, like a hired man, which he had done for 9 nights, and would have gone on doing without saying a word about it to anybody, except that Hattie Boone told her at breakfast. He what? He'd been sleeping in the barn, ma'am. For 9 days. For 9 days. He has a bed in this house. He has a bed in this house that you slept in for 7 years, Hattie said. And he ain't been in that room since November, and I don't believe he's going in it neither. Elizabeth set down her cup. Where does he sleep in the winter? Study, on the floor by the fire with his coat. Hattie. You asked. You could have written me that. I could have written you a great many things, Hattie said. I wrote you the one that was mine. Elizabeth stayed 2 more days. She did not see much of him, and she did not go looking. And on the second afternoon she walked down to the row houses on a Thursday out of pure habit and found that she was not needed. That was the strangest thing that happened to her in Virginia. Mrs. Mullen came out and hugged her and cried and asked after the school, and then said the roof had been done in December, and Thomas had not taken fever once all winter. Who did the roof? He did, ma'am. Samuel did. No, ma'am, him, Mr. Harrington. Mrs. Mullen wiped her eyes. He was up there 6 hours in the cold with a hammer, and I stood in my own yard and watched him, and I didn't know what to do with myself. And the men? 22 now. Some come back from Pemberton's. Why? Mrs. Mullen thought about how to say it. Ma'am, a body can knock on that kitchen door now, she said. That's the whole of it. Elizabeth walked back up to the house alone. She stood a long time in the front parlor, in the corner where a pianoforte had been, and she understood something she had come 62 miles without knowing. It was not that he had done it. It was that he had done all of it while she was gone and told nobody, and would have gone on doing it if she had never set foot in that county again. That was the difference. That was the entire difference. She left on the 3rd morning. She said goodbye to Hattie, who cried and swore she wasn't crying, and she went out to the yard where the coach was waiting and found William Harrington standing there with her bag already loaded. You didn't have to. I know. William. Yes. I'm going back to Sutton's Ford. Yes. Aren't you going to ask me anything? No, ma'am. You're not going to ask me if I'm coming back? No. Why not? And William said, because if you're coming back, you'll come. And if I ask, then whatever you do next has got my hand on it. Elizabeth stood there in her own yard. You want to say something else? She said. I do. Then say it. No. William, I'm going to be honest with you, and then I'm going to hand you into that coach, he said. There is a sentence in my mouth that has been there since October. It is a good one. I have worked on it all winter, and it is the best thing I have ever put together, and I know exactly what it would do to you if I said it right now, standing here with you tired and Hattie sick, and that man waiting on you 60 miles north. Elizabeth's breath caught. That's why I'm not saying it, William said, because I'd be using it, and I have used you for 7 years without ever once meaning to, and I would rather choke on that sentence than get you into a coach with it. He opened the door. Ma'am. She got in. She did not cry until the second stage, And then she cried for 11 miles. And the woman traveling with her had the good sense to look out the other window. Jonah Reed was at his forge when she got to Sutton's Ford, and she went to him before she went to Pearl's, before she took her bag off the coach, before anything. "Ma'am?" "Jonah." He wiped his hands. "You look like you've been on a coach 2 days." "I have been on a coach 2 days." "Sit down." "I don't want to sit down." "Then don't." He set the hammer on the anvil. "Say it, ma'am. I've knowed since April." "Don't do that." "Do what?" "Don't make it easy for me," Elizabeth said. "I have had every hard thing in my life made easy for me by somebody else deciding it before I could say it, and you are not going to do that to me too. You stood up in a church in front of 40 people and you told me you knew how to wait. You have waited 7 months and you never asked me once. You are going to make me say it." Jonah Reed put his hands on his hips and looked at the floor of his own shop. "All right," he said. "Say it." "No." He looked up. "Ma'am." "That's my answer, Jonah. No." Her voice held, and she made it hold. "Not because he sent a piano. Not because he fixed a roof. Not because of one thing he has done, and I want that understood, because if I ever hear it said in this town that I went back to that man out of gratitude, I will stand up in that church myself and correct it." "Then why?" "Because I do not love you," Elizabeth said. The forge was very quiet. "I have thought about it honestly, which is what you deserve, and I could have. That is the truth, and you may have it. In 2 years in this town, with your girl and your bad step and your covered dishes, I could have. And that is not the same thing, and you would have known it inside of a year, and it would have killed something in you." Jonah Reed stood there and took it. "Well," he said, "I'm sorry." "Don't you dare." "Jonah." "No, ma'am." He picked the hammer back up and set it down again without knowing he'd done it. "You want to know the worst of it? I ain't even surprised. I've been carrying it since the wagon come. I just wanted to be a man who'd waited one time in my life." "You were." "I reckon." "Jonah, look at me." She waited until he did. "You gave a woman who had never been asked for anything a chance to say no to something good. Do you understand what that is? Do you understand that no man alive had ever let me do that?" His jaw moved. "That ain't much of a gift, ma'am." "It is the only one anybody ever gave me that I got to keep," Elizabeth said. She put out her hand, and he took it. This enormous man with a hammer in the other, and he shook it once like a business matter because it was the only way he could get through it. "Sarah Jane's going to take this hard. Sarah Jane is going to be at that school every day until she is grown," Elizabeth said, "because I am not leaving Sutton's Ford." Jonah's head came up. "Ma'am, I am not leaving this town." "But you just said—" "I said no to you. I did not say yes to him," Elizabeth said. "Those are 2 different pieces of business, and every soul in this county is going to want to run them together, and I would be obliged if you'd be the first man to keep them separate." Jonah Reed started to laugh. It came out of him rough and surprised, and it went on longer than it should have. "Ma'am," he said, "you are the hardest woman I ever met, and I don't know why anybody ever called you quiet." "Neither do I anymore," Elizabeth said. She stayed in Sutton's Ford 11 more months. She wrote to him in the 3rd week, and it was 4 lines long. "Mr. Harrington, Hattie writes that you are still in the barn. There is a house with 9 rooms, and I am not in any of them, and a man sleeping on a floor to punish himself is still a man arranging things so that somebody will notice. Go to bed. E. Whitmore." He wrote back in 5. "Mrs. Whitmore, you are right, and I have. It was not for you to see. It was that I could not lie in that room and think about the last thing I said in it, which was that you would have forgotten it by Sunday. I have not forgotten it by Sunday, and I do not expect to. W. Harrington." They wrote every week for 11 months. He did not once ask her to come back. She counted. 47 letters, and not a single line of it. And by the 6th month, she had begun to be angry about it, which she wrote to Pearl Dunbar, in the same house rather than say out loud. Then tell him, Pearl said. Tell him what? Tell him you want to be asked. I will not. Why in the world not? Because I have spent my entire life waiting to be asked, Elizabeth said, and it turns out the only thing worse than a man who never asks is finding out you cannot open your own mouth. Pearl put down her coffee. Honey, don't. That's the smartest damn fool thing I ever heard a woman say about herself, Pearl said. You want to know what you learned in my house? No. You learned to holler in the road, Pearl said. Now go finish it. She hired a schoolmaster in April, a young man out of Baltimore, and she interviewed him herself, and she made the committee that did not exist meet twice, and she put $600 of her own money into that school and had the trustees write it so that no man could ever shut it. Then she went to Virginia. She did not send word. She came up that drive at 4 in the afternoon on the 9th of May, 1 year, and 7 months after she had walked out the kitchen door at 3 in the morning, and Hattie Boone saw her from the window and dropped a bowl. Ma'am? Where is he? Orchard. Elizabeth stopped. Where? He goes out there most evenings, Hattie said. Has done since spring of last year. He don't do nothing. He just stands out there a while and comes back in. Elizabeth went out through the kitchen. He heard her coming and turned around, and he did not say her name, and he did not walk toward her, and she saw him make himself stand still with an effort that was visible from 30 feet away. Elizabeth. William. Is Hattie? Hattie's fine. I didn't come for Hattie. He did not ask. She watched him not ask, and it took him 3 seconds, and she saw every one of them. You still haven't said it, she said. Said what? The sentence. The one you've been carrying since October. No. It's been 19 months. I'm aware. Are you ever going to say it? No, William said. Why not? Because it's a good sentence, he said. That's why. I built it and I polished it and I know what it would do, and every time I have thought about saying it, I have understood that the whole reason I want to say it is so that you will feel something and I will get to watch. He shook his head slowly. That's the old man. That's the man at the table with the glass in his hand who wanted the laugh. I'd rather he didn't get one more thing in this life. Elizabeth stood in her own orchard and put her hand over her mouth. Then I'll go first, she said. Elizabeth, I was going to say the pears were mine. He went white. That's it, she said. That's the whole of what I practiced. 32 people at that table, and I was going to say the pears are mine. I planted these trees the first spring I came to this house, and I put them up myself in August, and I would like you all to know it. Elizabeth, 14 words. Her voice broke, and she went straight through it. I said them out loud in this orchard for 4 days. I timed them for after the venison, and I sat at that table with my hands in my lap, waiting for a place to put 14 words about fruit, and twice I tried, and you told me to let the judge finish, and then you called for wine. Elizabeth, stop. No. She stepped forward. You wanted to know what it was. It was that. It was a woman 31 years old, practicing in an orchard, so she could tell a room full of people that she had made something with her own 2 hands. That was my great speech. That was the most I ever asked for in 7 years. William Harrington put his hand out and caught the branch of a pear tree because his legs were not entirely reliable. I would have given you the whole night, he said. I know that now. I would have stood up and stopped the table and made every one of them listen. You would have, Elizabeth said. That is the man standing here. He was not there in October. That is what I have spent 19 months finding out. He looked at her. Ask me, he said. What? You told me once to ask you a question. In that room that night. You said ask me anything, and I stood there and I could not think of one. He straightened up off the tree. I have had 19 months. Ask me now. William. Ask me anything you like. Elizabeth Whitmore looked at her husband. What do I want? She said. And William Harrington said, You want to be the person somebody is waiting on one time before you die. You want to walk into a room and have it get quieter instead of louder. You want a Thursday that belongs to you. You want your name to be Whitmore in the front of a ledger and nobody's wife in the back of one. And you want somebody to ask you a question and then sit there and wait longer than you expect because that is the only way anybody ever got a word out of you. And it is the only thing you have ever wanted from me. Elizabeth stood there. How long have you known that? Since about February of last year. Why didn't you write it? Because you'd have read it on a page in Sutton's Ford, William said, and then it would have been mine. A thing I figured out. A clever man's letter. He took one step and stopped. It's yours. It was always yours. I just finally learned to say it out loud. She came the rest of the way herself. They did not go back to that marriage. That is the part the county never got right, and it got told wrong in every parlor in Virginia for 20 years, and neither of them ever bothered to correct it. She kept the trust. She kept the school in Sutton's Ford and went up 4 times a year until she was 60, and the schoolmaster from Baltimore married a girl from that town and stayed 30 years. She kept her name in the front of the ledger. Elizabeth Whitmore, and under it in the same clear hand the accounts of the Harrington estate, which she ran openly from that day with the door open at a desk in the study, instead of a bottom drawer in the morning room. She played the pianoforte in Sutton's Ford Church until she died, because she would not take it back from those children, and William Harrington bought her another one and had it put in the parlor in the same corner and never once mentioned what it cost. Hattie Boone lived 9 more years and complained about all of them. Jonah Reed married a widow from Colton in 1822 and named his second daughter Elizabeth and told anybody who asked exactly why. And at the Harrington supper that October one year, to the night with 22 people at that table and Judge Ashford at the far end and Dr. Reeves beside him. William Harrington stood up before the venison was cleared and put his glass down without drinking from it and said, "My wife has something to say, and I'd take it kindly if this table gave her the whole of it." And Elizabeth Whitmore stood up in her own dining room and said 14 words about a pear tree, and 30 people listened to every one of them. She was never quiet again, and no man in that county ever mistook her silence for nothing, because the woman they had all watched leave without looking back had come home on her own terms, in her own name, and taken her place at the head of the only table that had ever belonged to her.